Call the meeting to order. This is the City Council meeting, Tuesday, February 13th, 2018. Thank you all for coming. The four council are here, and first we have approval of minutes. They've been circulated by our clerk January 9th, January 23rd, January 30th, and February 8th. Has council been able to view them? There's copies in the back. I'd like to do them all in one, if possible, unless council has specific ones. Are there any additions or corrections to any of these minutes? Hearing none, the minutes are approved by unanimous consent. Okay, Steve Kuhl is here, and he's going to present and review the FY19 budget. Welcome, Steve. Thank you for coming. We all got a copy of your most recent report you and Sylvia have been working on.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Can you move the microphone right?
Yep, I'll get there.
Thank you.
Okay, I've passed out the most current version of the worksheet here. There are some things that'll still be up for discussion yet to finalize or see if we got reasonable final numbers to go with. So what I'm going to do is we'll do it on the same format we did last week. I'm generally going to go through this and highlight a few items, and then if there's any questions I might be able to answer, I'll do those, and then quickly go over the schedule for wrapping this up, and then after that, then you can have your council members discussion afterwards, and whatever final changes are, I'll need those, but I'll cover that in the calendar. So anyway, in your packets, the first page here, this is from the State Department of Management website on the adoption and certification of the budget or the property taxes for this year. These amounts are set. They're based on either a maximum levy rate or based on exact needs like debt service, payroll taxes, employee benefits, and so forth. So the property taxes, these will be the set amounts. In the lower right-hand corner, the highlighted number there, that's the levy rate for this year. Not quite $10.94. That's about 13.5 cents more than last year, or the year we're on right now. That's like $10.80 or 81 cents, something like that. Mm-hmm. So it was about a 1.25% increase in the levy rate. The rest of the worksheet is basic. A lot of it's in the same format and everything as last week. Several amounts have changed, either updated information. Let's see. I don't think I had anything that I wanted to cover on page 1. On page 2, one thing I wanted to cover here on the second column from the right, this will be in the current budget year we're in. There are 4 numbers that are shaded in blue. There might have been a little bit of confusion last week on the discussion about Olive Court project that's coming up. Last year at this time, that project was approved for this year, for fiscal 18, and also the visioning project. Those 4 numbers, they net out to 0. That's the cost of those projects, the developer contribution towards Olive Court, and then the bonding to make up the difference. So these amounts, when we move ahead into May, when we amend the budget, because this project has been postponed for one reason or another, very little of that cost is going to be in this year. What we're going to do for the amendment of the budget for this year is those items are going to be pulled out, because we have Olive Court in the fiscal 19 year now. That project won't get started, or construction will be after this coming summer. So let's see.
I have a question, Steve. The 27 will still be there for this year, will it not? For the
Dottie, we're going to have to put the microphone right in front of your mouth.
I'm sorry. For the visioning project,
Thank you.
are you pulling that?
For the visioning,
It's 27.
that we moved
No,
that.
that's still included in this budget for 19,
Mhm.
for budget year 19, Dottie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For 18 is going to be amended then. But
Okay, so
so we're going to take out
okay,
the budgeted numbers that we have.
but it will be in for this year.
It won't. There
then
will be
next-
very little by this June 30th. We may.
Right, but then starting June of 18.
For 19, that'll be when the project will be,
Okay.
and then we've got it in the budget
Okay,
here.
okay.
Yeah, in the
Because
right.
it was in flux.
Yeah, and it's getting a little bit more solid because Steve has made sure that it's included in fiscal year 2019 through 2020.
Yeah. So, anyway, let's see. Otherwise, we've had some other changes. We've had some updated costs. Also, some of the planned street panel or street repair projects and stuff have been pulled out for probably consideration for fiscal 20. So right now, based on this budget here, we're basically at a break-even point. Based on these numbers, we still have a few items that could change yet. I don't think they're probably going to be significant. So,
Looks like $57.10. Very good.
Well, and that'll be part of the discussion. And probably, Steve, you can give them a preview of what we were discussing, maybe. I don't know. Okay.
yeah. So anyway, as far as the calendar and schedule for completing, let's see, the March council meeting is March 6th, is that correct?
March 6th.
March 6th, okay. The publication will need to be made by Saturday, February 24th. The newspaper asks for about 4-day lead time from the time we submit it to them so they can get it published. Preferred plan would be to submit it to the newspaper on Monday the 19th. So any other final changes and so forth, I would need to have them by Friday morning so I can get the Department of Management file completed and the publication page out and ready to go. And then also the week before then, over the weekend, right before the March 6th meeting, then I'll send out one more final worksheet copy and the full Department of Management file that'll be submitted by March 15th. So.
And then we'll have the public hearing on March 6th at that
Yeah, that
meeting.
will be the public hearing.
And then the council will decide to adopt it or not. Yeah. Very
Yeah.
good.
And then I will submit the file to the state before March 15th, so it gets filed in time.
Perfect.
So
Are there any?
anyway,
Yeah. Do you have some more? I just wondered if anybody had questions for you.
yeah. If anybody has questions,
Well, we'll talk a
Met
little
with
more.
Sylvia several times. A lot of us have had email conversations and information back and forth. I think we've pretty much got everything covered here, but you know, you'll need to go through it one more final time, and anything that needs final change, then just let me know as soon as possible then. So,
Thank you.
okay. Otherwise, that was all I had.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it.
Okay. All right.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sylvia, you wanted to continue some discussion tonight?
I did. For starters, part of the budget actually involved a legal question. It involved a number of different questions to different departments, so thank you for all the counselors for responding and cooperating on, trying to figure out best numbers and resourcing. But there is a legal question that is outstanding on our budget, and that is what to do with, in order to balance the budget that we have right now, we need to make a line item available for the city's use. And that line item is affordable housing at page, I think it's at page, see where the, page 5. And it's at the bottom of the column. And it's an amount in the exact amount that we have a gap in our budget. So we have a budget deficit of $23,782. And in order to close that deficit, I looked in the budget several times, many times, made some of you got 2, if not 3 calls, if not 4 calls from me to see if we can close that budget. And the last person that got a call was legal, Steve, to see how we could make use of affordable housing in the amount of $23,782. What does that mean? If we don't close the gap by using this line item, it means that we pretty much are not doing anything for fixing up some of our sidewalks for ADA compliance. And yet again, we move on to maybe a 4th year. If a 4th year of not doing ADA panel compliance, at least at a rate of 1 corner of a street somewhere in University Heights. So we started off being very ambitious. As a council, we wanted to do all 5, but then the gap was $117,000. So we stripped out some street and sidewalk improvements to bring that amount down. And that's what it means right now. We are at a bare bones streets and sidewalks policy budget, which worries me because I think many of us on council have expressed a desire to make our city walkable and pedestrian friendly, and not having at least one ADA ramp fixed in this fiscal year doesn't really show a lot of commitment to that statement. So I'm very concerned that we need to access this this line item, which I see it kept in a lockbox. It's like it's in a lockbox, and we don't have a key to unlock this lockbox and tap the money for things that we need now. So this is this $23,782 originate from the TIF transaction that was awarded to the Maxwell project back in 2016 or 2015. Maxwell gets 95% of property taxes rebated, and the city gets a 5% amount from those property taxes. Last fiscal year, I think the city collected about $2,000 or so, and this year we collected $25,000 for a grand total of this amount, $23,782. It just keeps rolling from one fiscal year to the next. And so I can let Steve advise us as a council as to what our options are to unlock this lockbox. with cash for the city to meet the budget, or we as a council can set aside time to discuss now what other line items in the budget we can continue to pare down in order to make that to take care of that gap. But I've got to tell you that I'm down to looking at legal publication fees. I'm down to looking at legal fees as well. I'm down to the farmers market getting cut, the Cultural Arts Commission getting cut, the community center got a cut, asphalting projects in the city are getting cut, street repairs, sidewalk repairs are getting cut, even the tree board got cut. So there's no running away from the fact that we have a gap, and this is part and parcel of what comes with city finance planning. So we have a gap tonight, and we need to take care of it. And so I'd like to have a little bit of discussion from my fellow peers at the table to see what we can or can't do.
Could you discuss, too, the bonding that was suggested last night for the Olive Court project, just so people
right
will know that?
That has been suggested that we, Steve is now gone, but we have talked about bonding, and we'd need to take it out in this upcoming fiscal year, not this current year, in order to alleviate some of our financing there. And that projects actually, where is the bonding information?
Yeah, I saw it earlier.
Yeah, I did too. We have a new printout. Is it page 2? Okay. So Olive Court, bond proceeds, it's already accounted for in our income. So at page 2, you'll see a column header that says other financing, resourcing, bond proceeds. Steve has allocated 2 years worth of bonding for Olive Court with the hopes that it would get done in this fiscal year, and it did not, so it's getting rolled over to the next fiscal year. So we have money coming in through bonding in our budget, and then your information for your debt levy at the end being paid out for your expense. So this is being accounted for. So it's not like we've overlooked $200 and some dollars of bonding capacity. So it's built in, but we still have a $23,000 gap in the budget. So if you were looking for change through the bonding tool, it's already accounted for.
Sometimes we add other projects to, like George Street. It was added, that bus stop, and I thought possibly maybe some of the ADA could be added to that.
Well, I'd like to, that's like using our city credit card.
Yes,
and it's
it is.
Piling on. We already have
I'm just saying
uses.
It's an option. I'm not saying,
right.
I'm just for discussion.
Yep. I think the more prudent way is to look at other departments. Right now, the last remaining department that I'd like to hear back from to see if there's any opportunity to bring down some of this revenue through one way or another would be from the UHPD. So I know that they have pared down. They've already looked at their budget like twice already, if not 3 times, and we may have to look at it a third. And then after you've done that, is there any other line items that anybody can think of? I mean, I went all the way down to legal publications. I don't know where the pencil fund is, but I don't want to go that far. But the point is, it's not for lack of working with people, with colleagues and staff to work a solution out. But it may have to be that we take it to bonding. But I think that's adding to your credit card, and we already have several charges on that credit card.
We do. So Nate and Nick are going to speak.
The other thing, too, that go ahead, Nate and Nick.
Well, I mean, we've gone through it again and again. I think it's pretty...
Yeah, I mean, it's getting down to So another option that we hadn't explored is the impact of a contribution of the 2 homes from Habitat for Humanity. That's about $100,000 worth of a contribution, but that's coming in this year. And I looked at our budget right now, current expenditures for February, and we're running through our expenses quite a bit. And so, but of course, I think the contribution from Habitat is $100,000, and I'm wondering maybe we can push forward some of that amount to cover for this gap. I'm not sure. I'd have to check with Steve Cool on the accounting for that. But that is another resource that's available. I'd hate to break a 100. Don't like doing that, but if we need to be left with 80 some, then we need to, or 70 some actually.
I have a question. So with the building inspector amounts, you got the 30,000,
Yep.
and then I was looking for the offsetting for the hotel. Is there an offsetting coming from the hotel permit to pay for the extra building permit costs or the building inspection costs?
And that's a question for legal. I don't recall that any of the Marriott hotel documents have an offset clause, but maybe Steve may recall better.
So we've got, on page 4, we've got building inspections and then building rental inspections. And then that went from 12,500 to 30,000.
What page are you on?
Oh, page 4. That jumped out to me as a big number, and I just didn't know if there was an offset for that.
Yeah. My preliminary assessment is no offset for legal, no offset for engineering, and no offset for building permits. But I need to make sure with our legal, Steve, what
Yeah, so
your opinion is.
I don't know where that number came from. I mean, I don't know if that contemplates the building permit fee for the hotel, or I don't know where that number comes from. The way that there's a reimbursement agreement between the city and the hotel developers that says post approval of the plan, which was accomplished at the end of last year, so kind of now. So from this point forward, the developer's obligated to reimburse the city for kind of all the city's costs and expenses, professional, whatever, related to the hotel, but it gets a credit for that reimbursement with the dollars that it pays for required city permit fees, like the building permit, electric permit, whatever.
So they do have it. They do have a reimbursement schedule then. Okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's definitely a reimbursement commitment. It's just that I don't know, I don't know.
The number?
Yeah. Well, I don't know the number, and I don't know how much the building permit costs. So the building permit costs them $30,000. Then the city sends them bills saying, you need to reimburse us for this, but we're going to take it off the $30,000 you already paid. And that goes until that's exhausted, and then they have to pay whatever amounts there might be. So I don't know if I'm helping you any, because I don't.
That helps. Do you think at the end of the day, though, if we have $30,000 in that line for building rental inspection, because if you look over the history of it, it was higher, and then it went low last year, and then it's high again, assuming it's for the hotel. Should that end up zeroing itself out in the same fiscal year?
I think that I don't think that there will be that much in sort of professional fees that are incurred. So I think the city sort of comes out ahead on that. That would be my guess with that sort of a number. But I don't know that that's, with the building permit fee for like OUP was like $90,000.
$79,500 for the building, $22,820 for the electrical, almost $2,000 for mechanical, and $6,000 for plumbing.
So I don't.
$110,000 and change.
Yeah. So I don't know that I don't know that 30,000 is the accurate number. That looks to me like what normal building permits would be.
Right. I don't think they've been included, and when I talked to Terry about this, he thought it would be comparable to OUP.
Oh, well.
Okay,
Really?
so there we go.
So that's
Jim
a-
Lane had mentioned he estimated 60,000-70,000.
And that's okay if if it's an offset, it's
Right,
just
money
we have,
in, money out.
yeah, we just have $30,000 there, so I want to make sure.
Well,
that
we don't know. I mean, it's all speculative. I
That's
don't
an
know.
expense. Is that that's your
Right.
expense, you don't have it in revenue?
Right,
No, we don't have it on revenue. That should be on page 1.
right.
So if you look at the side comment, it says regular 15,000, hotel 0.
Zero, yeah.
Right.
Right. So I guess what I would say is if the estimates that you've just heard people talk about
We're
are
going to net out, though. If you have 30 expected and you're expending 30 over here, or this is part of your 30, then you're not adding any additional cash to offset elsewhere.
but what I heard people saying was that the permits wouldn't be adding 30, they'd be adding somewhere more closer to 100. And I can't speak to that,
Right.
but if that's what
I don't know. It's so speculative. And when last I spoke to Jim Lane on the transition meeting with him, he told me he wouldn't advise not to calculate in permits just because they were speculative. So it made sense to me. So I
Where the 30, I'm sorry, maybe it's blowing.
I don't
Where's
know.
because if we're
Who-
saying the 15 is a regular income that we'd get, I just
what
don't
does
think
Terry Gert normally expend for residential? Because I know we pick up a percentage of that.
As far as building permits for 2017, we were in the 10,000 range for the permits.
So even if you subtract out 10, you're still left with 20. So if anything, you'd end up with a surplus that you would not have anticipated or projected for. So let me ask Steve Cole on that one what his thinking was, because I did not build that 30 into that. And I left it out on the presumption that there was no reimbursement operating on the Marriott.
Or 15,
I know
yeah.
clearly it was on the one UOP.
So we can just table that if you want, or
Yeah, we'll
if
have
we
to.
think 15 is a normal number, then at least it can go down to 15, and that's what the income is that we had estimated.
Well, it gets a little bit more difficult. So when I spoke to the developers a while back to ask them about their expenses for their Coralville Marriott hotel that they built, they told me it was about 40. Their accountant reported 42,000 in permits.
Well, I was just trying to
But
take
my
the hotel
thing
out
is-
of it
Right.
and just say if the normal is 15. So Chris, the normal income for permits is about 15. The normal expense is about 15. Is that accurate?
I'm talking only on the revenue side, which is the
The 10.
10,000. Yeah.
So the expense side, we're just saying we have no idea where the 30 came from. It
Right.
was the 12.5 last year, or I guess 12.5 was. Yeah. Okay.
So I mean, if anything, we could match it to the 15, so we don't create a deficit of 15. So why don't we do? Are you all comfortable if we were to align the income of projected permits, which are on page 1, at 15,000, on the theory that it should align with your building rental inspection permits on page 4 for 15? So then we are decreasing this 23,000 gap by 15,000.
Page 4.
So it's money in at 15,000 and expenditures in the budget for 15,000. That nets out to 0. Whereas right now you have money coming in at 15, but somehow we're calculating a $30,000 expense out with a negative of 15. So I was just saying, let's align the numbers, and if we get a good surprise from the permits being as high as one UOP was, that's fine. My concern is that for the Coralville Marriott Hotel, I was informed it was about 42,000 in permits. But that's Coralville, that's their permitting system, their permitting charges. So I opted not even to speculate about whether all of their permits would happen in fiscal year or in the fiscal year 19 or not. And that was consistent with at least Jim's last remarks to me. Are there any concerns if we make that change?
Pending, yeah, more information from Steve. I think that sounds fine.
Are you cool with that?
Okay. So, all right, so we're down to $8,782.
I guess my next question would be, Josiah, do you have a copy of the most recent budget? And do you see anything there that jumps out at you as being overstated?
For the street projects?
Yeah, for what actually is in there? Any insights that you have? I mean, we updated some of those numbers since you were here last.
I would,
They should be.
Several of them have been zeroed out, obviously, and then
Right,
others
yeah.
have been reduced. So,
Right.
I mean,
Some
that's
we've
the
increased.
The scope of what you can accomplish. So,
right.
I guess more it's the ones that we've increased a little bit. I think did we increase asphalt over the number? And
I
panels?
increased asphalt from 4,000 to 7,600 on the theory that we need to be more proactive as a community to pick up all those potholes. This is not your fancy deep panel replacement. This is just cosmetic, make the street look even. So we're talking very bare bone expenses.
And I don't disagree with that. It's just whether any of
No,
those
not at all. Yep.
increases, maybe are something that you think, well, we've done pretty, if we've cycled through and we maybe would spend quite a bit less. That's what I was just curious about.
Sure. The other thing we could do is, let's see. Oh, yeah, it was kept. Marietta West was retained on the next page, which is 5, and that's 10,000. That is a walkability issue. That is a safety issue, and we do have right now an $8,000 gap. Dottie, what do you say if we eliminate Marietta West on the theory that we're keeping the Sunset Marietta project at 23,000?
No, because the Sunset project for the bus stop and all was delayed. It should have been this last year. So I am not in favor of reducing that. If there's anything in the city that needs more budget, it's streets and sidewalks and lighting. So, no, I would not be at all. It's in very bad condition. I think there are other departments that, could take the hit without a public safety issue.
Is that right by Tower Court? Is that Marietta West?
It's right, but it's between George and Sunset.
Between George, okay.
Marietta West is from George to
To
Lytham.
s-
It's
to-
the asphalt overlay.
Oh, okay.
It's east.
It's
of
from George
No, wait. Just,
to
to Lytham.
Lytham condos.
okay, but that would be in front of my house, and that was not done. That was not finished. I mean, like you did Lytham.
How's the rest of the council feel about that?
On the rental permits, we have $30,000, but if we still have the 223 permits at 150, that's an extra $3,450.
Oh, they're not 125. Okay. So how much extra do we have?
The total is $33,450.
So let's correct that. Okay, so that needs to be adjusted. So 223 permits times 150. Yeah, we did 125. Okay. And what's the difference? What's the delta change?
I just got rid of it.
3,450, I think you said.
I'm sure
Because
I
it was
did.
30,000. And so it was 33,450.
Okay, we're
So
getting
I think
closer.
it's,
3,450 is the
yeah,
change.
there you go. I actually wrote it down off your
All right. and
calculator.
2. Okay, so we're down to 5,382. And Chris, you can double check my math on that. Mine's just pen. Let's go ahead and I would offer that let's restore some of the streets and sidewalks down to, let me ask UHPD, can you guys see any areas or spot any areas that might be helpful? Any supplies?
Sorry, what's it?
I'm just asking if there's any areas that we're down to
it was an
a
area?
gap of
Okay, well, I was talking about-
5,382.
So, okay. That's between Georgia and Latham, in front of me.
Is there anything that could be delayed on UHPD in terms of an acquisition? We even had a reduction in the sidewalk inspection program. I know that Josiah was concerned that with 140 properties on the southeast of the city, we wouldn't be able to do all of them. And I said, look, I'm not here to just slash and burn the budget, but if we can at least do 50% of those 140 properties, it's 50% done, and the next can roll over into the next year. So we were looking at those types of splits in terms of projects.
So Josiah,
If not, what I'm going to propose is that the Vision Project, the west entrance, that we make an adjustment, actually, that we eliminate the west entrance, city entrance of 5,000 this fiscal year. I mean, it's coming down to that unless any other department can pitch in.
Buy fewer training cartridges for the
2,000?
tasers.
Okay.
2,500.
Page 3. Okay, I'm sorry, thank you. What is our, okay, 15,000, 3,500. Mm-hmm. Are you going to be doing tree canopy as well?
you know, people tell me on TV they can't hear. Could you step up to the microphone? I'm sorry.
Tree trimming had a budget of $15,000 in the current fiscal year, and we only used about $7,000 so far.
Mm-hmm.
You can probably take the $10,000 down to $7,000 or $8,000. If there's a major storm event, we're gonna blow that budget completely. But under normal circumstances, we should be able to stay well within that range.
How about if I take 1,882 from the tree board?
Absolutely.
Thank you. All right, so we close the gap.
Thank you, Virginia.
Thank you, colleagues at the table, and everybody who's rooting us on to get this done. All right, so with these changes, I think we're good. I'm going to ask if who else listened to these values so that we can double check before council closes. So let's see. We have an adjustment to the rental permits at page 1 for a contribution of $3,450. We have at page 3 a contribution from UHPD for $3,500.
I thought it was 2,500. Is it 3,500?
$3,500. The delta.
I think it's 20
Oh.
down to 15 from
17.5 yeah, down to 15.
You're right, but
Never,
that's just
never.
the math.
I'm sorry. Is it 2,000 or 3,000?
Two.
Okay, I've got it wrong.
Yep.
2,500.
The difference between that and
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm trying to see better numbers here. Okay, 2,500. All right, so we do have a small gap, but I will revisit the tree board to reduce the outstanding amount. So if everyone is comfortable with that, we'll work with that. So we will consider our budget balanced and move on from here. All right, thank you, everyone. And this will get posted for the public. For our viewers watching, what this means is that you can review the budget. If you have any concerns as to how money is being prioritized, taxpayer money prioritized on any of these categories, you are certainly welcomed to write to council at council@university-heights.org and give your feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go on to city snow removal report. And Mark Phelps is here, who's our contractor for the snow. And we've had quite a bit of snow this year. And you want to give a report? Thank you for coming, Mark.
Sure. Dottie asked me to come in and explain to you how we attack a situation or a storm. Each one's a little bit different. If it is currently snowing outside, just want to make sure. If it's snowing outside during rush hour, we attack the mains first. Basically, each one's a little bit different. Each road is. Sometimes there's 3 passes. We go over center, and your larger mains is 5 passes, but it's not all 5 passes done at once. We try to make loops around. They do leave the blades down. They may use a side street to get back to a main. They're constantly putting salt or sand, whichever we are carrying on that truck on the mains. Then they switch and go to the side roads. If it looks like the event is done, then they just pretty much do the entire town at once. But at all times, they usually have the blade down, and we put 50% of snow on each side of the street. We don't favor one side versus the other. Unfortunately, people that live on outside of corners, you're going to get more snow than the inside. It's physically impossible to bring it in. Then once the guys get done, if it's done snowing, they go to the corners and push back the corners on the streets to give the intersections a little bit more room. So you have had a lot of snow this year. In the last 7 days, it was about 15 inches. So
It was 15 inches?
yeah, between
Wow.
the 5th was a lot, and then and I assure you, we don't aim for anybody that's outside there doing anything and wait for them to finish their driveway. So it's usually the drivers, like it says, they do a pretty good job of slowing down if you're outside. So if anybody has any questions, I can field them.
Well, I was wondering, did you have a discussion about the manhole cover question we got from Paul Moore?
Oh, we got that resolved.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So
Yeah.
I don't know who
He
went
got
out
it
there
resolved.
and they lowered it somehow, but it was up.
Yeah, actually, Josiah had that lowered by his intern, correct? Yeah. Anyway, we solved that problem.
Yeah, it's solved, and it has not been an issue since then. And I haven't had any other contact from anybody on that street.
Good deal.
Yeah. Yeah, Mark's been very good. If there is a problem, whenever I call him, he's always trying to resolve
If
it.
you want to do a ride along, that is fine too.
Yeah.
If you feel like we're not doing something right, you can come with us. So,
No,
anything else?
thank you for coming, because there were a couple nasty emails regarding the way the snow was being removed in a preferential manner. And so I called you to have you explain to me, and then I thought, if you come to the meeting and you tell everyone how you uniformly remove the snow, there shouldn't be an issue.
On Grand Avenue, we use Grand Avenue a little bit more. We treat Grand Avenue as a main just because it makes it a loop for easier, so we don't have to back up. So Grand Avenue is scraped a lot more than some of the other ones because we use it as a loop to get back to Sunset or Melrose.
I see.
So, and because Grand Avenue is technically, you guys have George that comes across at the light where the mailbox is. So the only way to get all the way back around is to literally drive the street instead of turning around right there. And we found it's faster for us as long as we just keep moving in the forward direction. So that's why we're on Grand a lot more than, say, a side street.
I see. Any more questions?
And always the police department can get a hold of us at any point in time if there's an issue. And so far, I think we've only had, on the 5th this year, we were waiting to see what the storm was doing and try to get the kids out of school on Oakcrest. And that's our challenge is that hill with all the kids getting out of school. But I think we managed it all right.
Thank you so
You
much,
bet.
Mark.
Thanks.
Thank you.
The next is I talked to Jeff Maxwell, and he's unable to attend tonight, but he will send a written report. I didn't receive it yet. So I'm going to move to public input, and I wanted to tell everyone, you know, this is a regular meeting of the City Council, and we have a 2-page agenda. And for example, when we have work sessions or special meetings and work sessions on a specific topic, and I'm going to, you know, the obvious one was rental. There was a lot of people here to speak on that, and I know they wanted their questions answered, and I let them speak at length. Now tonight, because we had about a 2+ hour meeting on that subject, but tonight we have a lot of city business, and I want people, if they want to speak. But I'm going to limit it to 5 minutes and only speaking one time. We have a lot of business, and you can contact the council, and I encourage you to, either by email, by phone, making an appointment, or any of the staff. So if anyone would like to speak tonight, I'm limiting it to 5 minutes. So no, we don't have enough time to do that. I mean, the council's not making decisions tonight. They're having discussion. And so I'd like you to contact council or myself or staff, please. Thank you for asking. Would anyone like to speak now to the council on any subject? It doesn't have to be rental. It can be any subject. Okay, Mike, you have your hand up.
Mike Ritchie, 20 Olive Court. Last Tuesday, I saw a stand on TV over the issue of what they call it, University, their stand, and there was an article on the internet. And the one thing that I wanted to read this article real quick is that rental properties drive up home prices in the Iowa City area, especially downtown. The median home price here is more than $200,000, the highest in the state, and $50,000 more than the state average. According to the Iowa Association of Realtors, that's why Iowa City started its University program. With that said, after the last meeting I attended, I got a little bit more of a clearer picture from Stan on how things were being done in Iowa City at the 30% rate. Things were grandfathered in. If I understood it right, the properties that are rentals right now could be sold as rentals in the future in Iowa City. The one thing that I was kind of cautious of is how the program was policed with the 3-strike rule and stuff, but after it was explained even further of calling in corrective action and stuff, I personally feel that this is something that the other landlords could live with. You know, Tim might not be aware of all the things that have been going on that part of it. The other issue that I saw on the agenda tonight was the parking. And as far as allowing how many cars that can park at a rental and not do it at a owner-occupied, I feel that is quite unfair. Mm-hmm. And how do you police the rentals at or the parking at a rental? You don't know whose cars these things are. And quite frankly, you know, they could have friends, relatives over there, and I think that the restrictions of 4 cars or however you restrict that is something that's going to be very hard and difficult to police, and I also feel it's unfair if it's not done citywide for non-homeowners.
You've seen the parking lots that we have in town, like in the backyards?
Nick, the backyard of 20 Olive Court and 24 Olive Court, I've got cars parked there. And when I poured the concrete at 24 Olive Court, I was instructed by the city to put demarcation lines in there so that and all the cars have to be parked in that demarcation line. Now, I'm not saying that sometimes if I go over there, if the cars are not parked that way, but They're supposed to be. All my paying parkers are parked that way. And it is strictly legal for them to be parking there. Anybody outside that line, the police have the opportunity to go over there and ticket them at any given time.
You have 3 minutes. I mean, you just talked 3 minutes.
But Nick cut me in there, Louise.
I know. Well, if you want to
No,
talk
that's fine.
2 more minutes,
No,
you
I'm
can.
glad you asked the questions, Nick. And you know, the other thing about it is with my weekday parkers and stuff on there, and I've expressed this thing. One of the situations that brought up is you're doing this for commerce. Well, I don't charge them what I possibly could be getting out of this thing because I've gotten to know these people through the years that they've been parking over there. You know, and I go over there first a month, they're leaving cookies and junk for me to eat and stuff like that there. These are friends, and they have no other place to park. Parking is very, very difficult at the university. If the thing is changed, I would like to have some consideration from the city council so that I can give these people a notice that, you know, it's not going to be allowed anymore. You're going to have to find another place to park instead of just throwing them out to the ramp at $20 a day.
How much notice do you think is appropriate?
You know, Nick, that's really a hard question to ask. I would request a month because the parking is very competitive. I mean, you put an ad on Craigslist for parking, you got 10 people contacting you right away. And on this parking issue, the way that it's written up there on the agenda, it wouldn't affect a owner-occupied house necessarily. I mean, an owner-occupied house could still park cars there for weekday parking, which I find is unfair. But I would say that my house, you know, 20 Olive Court and 24, you know, I've parked 4 cars at each one of those houses.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anyone else? Tim?
I'm Tim Lehman. I have a property at rental property at 1124 Melrose Avenue. It's the Yellow Ranch home there. I'd like to address the possibility of you changing the parking. My house, I've owned it for about 15 years now, and I feel like I've been a good neighbor for everybody. I've had no violations that I'm aware of over those 15 years. My backyard is about a 60 by 60 concrete area. I do have 4 tenants that park 4 cars there, and I do have 4 other cars there that all work at one of the medical departments at the university. And there's no parking whatsoever in my front yard because my garage is underneath my house. So I think you've really got to look hard to find the cars back there. They're not stacked in there in any way. And I just feel that for some of us that have this type of situation, it should be grandfathered in. Any questions? Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Oh, hi, Jim. Reset.
Hi, my name's Jim Dersicki, and I have a few properties here in University Heights, 31 Lemur Court. I wrote a letter that I believe some of you council members got, and I wanted to speak about on the rental topic. With the rental homes being an important and sensitive topic, there's a strong need to openly communicate our problems and solutions. The only problems that I have heard to date, and maybe I've missed some, is that there was some voter statements that rentals are a problem, and I believe Sylvia mentioned that she had some complaints about some mold in basements that a landlord wasn't taking care of, things of that nature. And these sound like complaints. Obviously, when you have renters in any community, there's going to be some complaints, just like about potholes, just like about snow removal, just like I don't know anybody that hasn't fielded a complaint that owns a business or multiple complaints weekly. I wrote this letter to you folks addressing, to me, it doesn't seem like problems. It seems like something that we can deal with, and for whatever reason haven't dealt with it as a community. And I'd really like us to do that instead of add additional ordinances, additional things to enforce. I think we are quite restrictive as we sit right now. Before the council decides on a rental cap, I specifically would like council to provide to the community 3 things. One is, please demonstrate to the community members what the rental problems are. Not complaints, what are the problems that need to be addressed? That way we can make sure that we can measure if they're being addressed. Please also demonstrate that installing a rental cap will not hurt property values. I also watched the news article that Mike spoke of that had Stan on there. You look good, Stan. And of course, there was a statement that rentals had driven up property values. The third item is, please show fact-based research on why we want to vote or go against Stan's recommendation of 30%. And we want to go to a stricter cap of 20%, and how that's going to get us to wherever we're trying to get to, or where it's going to resolve whatever we're trying to resolve. Because I don't think these things are defined. With the rentals making an increase in property values, according to the news, and I believe according to reasonable thought processes there, if we are going to have caps and we're not going to grandfather in homes when they're sold again, that a rental permit can be obtained for that home, we're going to open ourselves up to a reduction in property values, which very well may open ourselves up into legalities for people seeking compensation for the reduction of the value of their home due to our action taken. So I would love to, I firmly believe we can address this in a simpler roundtable community fashion, and I would appreciate your thought.
Thank you, Jim. Would anyone else like to speak? You can speak about any subject. It doesn't have to be on the agenda. Okay. Thank you very much. Stan, well, I guess we maybe start with Steve, because, I mean, we have the consideration of Resolution 1811, extending the moratorium on issuing new rental permits established by Resolution number 1750. And you put that in your report.
Yeah, so at the council's direction, I put together ordinances that I circulated. There's still a work in progress, I guess. I still need some direction from the council. One of them will be a change to a zoning ordinance, so we have to publish a notice, I think, we have to publish a notice before the council can enact that change. So I think the idea was to try to get things done within the context of the moratorium, and the direction from, I think it was the meeting on the 23rd, was to prepare an ordinance that extends the moratorium to give the council and the community a little breathing room while the council considers sort of the final adjustments to an ordinance, and then presumably votes to enact it. So 1811 extends the moratorium to March 31. That was an arbitrary date that I picked. obviously, if the council feels like there should be another one, the council's free to insert that.
Would there want to be a motion on the table for that?
I'd like to motion that we extend the moratorium to take adequate time to flesh out the remaining issues that are in the legal report in the council packet today. And the 31st of March is a good recommended date, only because we have, spring break in between. We have March 6th as our regularly our switched council meeting date. So the only workable weeks that we have left are week 3 and 4 of March.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Dottie seconded. Discussion by council.
I guess I just want to double check that everyone thinks that's going to be enough time to go to the end of March as opposed to end of April, something like that.
That would mean we'd have to have more meetings.
Well,
Why not do it past the April meeting?
Well, my concern is that of the property owners, the landlords, because if the conditions will change, and many will, they need to be able to be informed so that they are in a better position to screen and rent their properties. So I think they need the time. So I think we need to get our business done.
I'm not objecting to extending if you needed an extension, but I do want to let you know that we'd need to collapse the ordinances potentially into 3 readings, maybe 1 and then 2 and 3, because if we're still discussing in April, you're only left May, and we have to have at least a 30-day heads up to the public that this change is taking place. So just timeline backing up on that, we're looking at a collapse. And number 2, I'd like some... we just need to make progress on what remains on the big issues. And I think the big issues really are the parking and the International Maintenance Property Code. I feel comfortable tackling that in March after everyone has returned from their spring break and everybody can attend.
Most of the new leases begin July 1 over here on this side of the river. So out of consideration, I think, we need to get our business done so that people are knowledgeable about what the new rules are.
So then that would require special meetings.
But at least one more.
At least one. Otherwise, the date in April is April 10th, our regular
we'd
meeting.
have to take action by April 10th to collapse if you wanted to go into April. If not, we'd have another special meeting sometime in April to do that very same action.
So right now it's March 31st in the motion, unless somebody would want to amend the motion. So you're kind of nodding to April 10th, so I didn't know what that meant.
We're just assuming we're going to have a special meeting the last 2 weeks of March, which is probably a good assumption. I also hear Dottie's concern too, that we give people as much notice as possible. So I think I'm fine with the March 31st. I just want to throw that idea out there.
Okay. Okay, it sounds like council's agreeing to that, and we'll find out soon because there'll be a roll call vote.
Maher?
Aye.
Moore? Aye. Casada?
Aye.
Herbold?
Aye.
Carried.
Okay, and then tonight is discussions of draft ordinances making changes to city policy regulation ordinances concerning housing, including rental housing. And I think, Steve, you did a nice summary in your report. I don't know if you want to start or Stan wants to start.
Yeah, I'm either way. So
here it
I
is.
tried to make this table. I don't know. Sometimes me and tables aren't quite what I hope they're gonna be, but I think this one came out all right. I tried to keep the starting point Stan's memorandum from the fall. I think that's what the council had sort of keyed off of. My green sections are action that's already been taken. The yellow sections are action that remains to be taken, and or ordinances that are before the council for discussion tonight. And then the blue sections are places where we need additional discussion.
And so it starts with
Oh, I did
Stan's
that
bullet
wrong,
point
actually.
of
Sorry.
adopt IPMC.
Yeah.
Sure. So there's a couple things in that we need to discuss, because this is all encompassing. One of the amendments we have to make is the schedule, which we have. That's not that hard to do. Tall grass and weeds, right now we're at 12 inches. I just wanted to double check and make sure we wanted to stay there. Iowa City's down to 10. What we've at one point, Iowa City was at 14. What we found is at 14, grass starts to curl and it never gets above it. So we moved it to 10. I think 12 is fair, and it's in another part of the code. But that is a distinction that has to be made.
Does anyone want to change it to?
It'd be nice to get the dandelions mowed before they flew all into my yard.
Then you might want to move it down to 10.
Well, what I found is that grass it's hard for it to go to 12 inches when it's not been maintained well.
Right.
And that when I look at people's property, maybe even my neighbor, it's easily 10, but it doesn't seem to want to reach 12.
Right. Yep. So, I mean, that's, 10 is very reasonable. So I thought I would bring that to you. So.
That is fine with me.
Okay. So I'll make that change and present that to Steve.
And Dottie's saying yes. Okay, that's 3. Yeah.
The other two are, and I'll just pull it from the current code. It reflects at what point the heating system has to work, and then when storm and screens have to be on. And I'll just pull that from the current code, which you have to have the screens in place May 1st, and you can leave them up until October 1st. And then if you don't have combinations, then you have to have the storms on there. And there are a few houses in town that still, a few rental houses in town that still have that, but it hasn't been an issue in the past. But that is one of the things that we have to put in there. Other than that, we were going to adopt the IPMC, the International Property Maintenance Code, as it's written in the 2015. And again, we're looking at the 2015, not the 2018, because the 2018 has provisions for sprinkling single-family homes, which we have not adopted building codes that would require that. So it would be it would be bad form to be requiring it in your maintenance code. And you don't want to also amend those sections out. If you amended those sections out, you'd basically get back to the 2015. So that's why the 2015 is the cleanest International Property Maintenance Code at this time. Questions?
I still just would like maybe another explanation on enforcement and how this might look to the normal homeowner who has a cracked, sidewalk or some sort of issue.
So we have systematic inspections of rental properties, and owner-occupied properties are inspected on a complaint basis. So if you had, drives and sidewalks that were completely broken up, it would rise to a level where it would require replacement. But on a normal course of business, Chris Anderson has some cracks in her driveway, large ones. The point is, I'm not systematically driving through the neighborhood and saying, Chris Anderson, you have a cracked driveway, we need to get that replaced. There's not the hazard is to herself at that point. And if she chooses to endanger her own life, it's a chance we're willing to take. So, I mean, that's kind of the rationale behind it. So,
What if I complain about Chris Anderson's driveway? I mean,
sure. Where we get those complaints is when Chris is infirm and we have nurses aides that are going to the home to take care of her and they're tripping and falling in the yard, there's a rational process that says, yes, the home health care aide, her safety needs to be taken into account at that point.
So not an irrational
No,
neighbor.
no, we're right, exactly.
Or council member.
Yeah, you can't use the property maintenance code as a weapon. Right.
Thank
Yeah. And then as far as you look at painting and all that, there's a reasonable expectation that, all of our properties are maintained. And that, we'll have to have some direction on what the expectations are. We didn't get some of the conditions of our owner occupied didn't get there overnight, and we shouldn't have an expectation that tomorrow they're going to be in compliance. So
won't our investor owners be a little bit discriminated against with that type of application of approach, with one group being more lenient? I mean, I understand that your investor owners, have a capital investment offset that they can make on their taxes, and they can quickly turn around a product and maintain it. Whereas some of our residents are seniors and they're in a tight budget or fixed budget.
Sure.
And I'm worried about them getting caught in a net where they can't even cure within 18 months because they just don't have the budget for it.
Well, I think we've looked at some other opportunities for the future of some money being available for
property tax abatement, maybe?
For owner occupied properties.
Right.
I think it's important that properties are maintained. I think there's some concessions that can be given to owner occupied. I think when it's an income property and there's other people there, and they're.
So Stan, let me ask you a question. Why can't we just apply the International Property Maintenance Code just to our rental properties and leave owner occupants out of it? And the theory is, for me, that really the capacity for our owner occupants is limited to whatever budget they have. And the city shouldn't really be drawing a line as to whose life and safety is more valuable. Is it the nurse that is assisting an elderly, incapacitated individual, for that matter, a young individual that's incapacitated in their home, versus a business operation? If you have a business operation in University Heights, I think just as a matter of business operation, business setup, it should be current with as much safety, as much attention to those details that the council's prerogative sets.
Yeah, so these are minimum standards, and I think
guess let me tell you why I'm concerned. Homeowners Association comes to mind, and I'm concerned that this might be perceived as a way of bringing in a homeowners association mentality to property rights.
If you over-enforce, there's always that possibility, but the idea is that you're providing a minimum standard for expectations. And it goes back to, we've heard about the broken window philosophy, that you have a neighborhood and you have a broken window, and next thing you know, you have multiple broken neighborhoods. So you apply that code equally to owner-occupied and to rentals.
Well, and my concern, too, is if we're looking at a community of rentals and personal private owned, all of the rules of the code apply to everybody, and it's also a matter of public safety for things like fire and sightly. If the one house looks unsightly, like Stan said, it's not long before a number of houses look unsightly. So I think you have a community expectation.
So my experience is I have 14 years experience in code enforcement, and that started out predominantly dealing with rental inspections, which is different because it's an income property and there's an expectation. Last year, on behalf of Iowa City, we conducted the University Impact Area inspections, which was the first time that we went out and we went through near downtown neighborhoods and we inspected the exteriors of all those properties, owner-occupied, rental, it did not matter, and we took a visual assessment of that property and noted any code violations and sent an inspection report to those homeowners. I got to meet a lot of people, and a lot of people who were like, "Who are you to tell me that I have to fix my roof, or I have to have gutters, or all these things?" And when you walk them through what the expectation is, the city of Iowa City was investing millions of dollars in these neighborhoods for stabilization, and there was an expectation that everyone do their part, and it was a very basic, very minimum inspection.
Will you have some images ready for us at one of our working sessions as to what the property maintenance code would be picking up currently?
I think I did that 2 meetings ago in the PowerPoint. It had the pictures of retaining walls, of paint.
Yeah, I saw those. Okay.
Okay.
All right. I know which ones you're talking about. Thanks for reminding me. Mm-hmm.
I can send you one for what defines clearly and consistent paint. I think you've seen that one, though, the one that we did for Iowa City. You've referenced that one in the past.
Incomplete jobs?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comments you wanted to know, some more direction for this?
I think we got direction on that. I just need to finalize that list and get it to Steve so he can incorporate it into the actual ordinance. Did everyone have a chance to look at the rental permit application process? Expectations?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there it is.
I'm not sure we have to discuss that now, but if you have comments or questions on that, or we can discuss that now of why things were worded certain ways, or timelines, or any of that.
Is this similar to Iowa City?
This is not. No,
It's not.
This is very uniquely University Heights.
I see.
One question would be, I guess for Steve, do you consider the Board of Adjustment the Board of Appeals?
That's the way I have it set up.
Okay. Yeah, that would be my only question on that, of who would hear.
Yeah, you listed somewhere Board of Adjustment.
I did, yeah. And if you don't have any questions or comments on that, I'll work with Chris to get that on official city letterhead and list it as a policy.
Are we mailing it out then? Email, mail, anything like that?
The policy? Yeah, I think we send that out.
Can you at least give us until council meets at sometime in March to finalize the policy?
Sure. Yep.
That way we have an exclusive time to do a work session and give you
Okay.
guys just very focused feedback.
So maybe by the end of March.
Okay.
Mhm, yeah. I think the budget's been consuming everybody's attention in the last 48 hours.
I think so.
And then Steve, do you want to go through the
Sure.
housing code?
Yeah, so looking at this ordinance 223 is the proposed ordinance that amends the rental housing code, or you can look at the chart, but just, I guess, looking at the ordinance, maybe I'll just walk through it if that makes sense to the council. We define owner-occupied dwelling to be only natural persons, so there's no owner-occupied status if an entity is the owner. That was a point of discussion. we clarified that you can't. So if somebody, for any reasons, but particularly with respect to this cap, if the council enacts it, we clarified that you can't get a rental permit unless you are a rental use. So you can't say, well, I think I'll go get a rental permit, and even though I'm an owner-occupied structure, and then I'll have my rental permit if I want to sell my home and it can be a rental. Probably wouldn't work with the way the cap is proposed presently, but we sewed that up just to make sure. Then I guess the first real big one is there's a section 110.048 that puts a cap on the number of rental permits in the R1 zone at 20% of all dwellings in that zone. And there's quite a few provisions. I guess I'm not going to necessarily walk through every one of them, but the ordinance specifically says that property owners don't have a vested right to sort of have renewal of a rental permit. That's axiomatic, frankly. That's not a profound statement. It's just true. But then it says that to balance the interests of owners that have permits against the and the city's desire to achieve the goals of this cap, that it doesn't use this word, but that basically current permit holders are grandfathered, under certain conditions. And what it says is that that the permit has to be in good standing, and the owner-operator has to submit a rental permit application on time with all required fees. The permit hasn't been subject to a discipline or sanction, by a suspension or revocation or reduced term. There's a variety of these conditions, I guess. As I said, I wasn't going to walk through them all, and I guess I'll stop now unless you have questions about them. But I think that one of the big things that the council either needs to approve in terms of direction tonight as this is written, or indicate that you want something different, is the idea of whether the grandfathering, so to speak, follows the property or not. The way the ordinance is drafted, the grandfathering would not follow the property, but if the council desires that it follow the property, that can be changed. But that was a point of contention in discussion. That's probably the first big point that I need some direction on. And I don't need that direction this minute. I should be clear about that. But right now the ordinance says that the grandfathering does not go with the property, and so if the council doesn't want it that way.
Steve, could I ask a question on that topic? If the council decided not to allow grandfathering in the sense that the rental permit went and then that right to renew in a sense went, is there an in-between option of allowing a sale, say in January, that would allow, or maybe this is already part of this understanding, that if someone sold a property in January, that permit would still be
Carried over.
play the rest of that year, right?
Yeah, that's right, and that's part of the ordinance. Okay. So the ordinance, as it presently exists, contemplates that permits may be transferred. Okay, and so what the revised ordinance says is that that's still true, but when you come up for renewal, if there's been a transfer since the last time the permit was issued.
Because the lease would continue with the tenants, it would be reasonable that the permit continue until the end of the year, I think.
Okay. So, as I said, I think that grandfathering doesn't stay with the property is a big issue, and as it's written now, the grandfathering does not stay with the property. Then the next section of the proposed ordinance 223 is 110.04B, and this was what was sort of described variously as a safety valve or safe harbor type of circumstance where if there's a limited duration or I'm sorry, that there would be a rental permit that would be issued for a limited duration, not longer than 2 years, for certain conditions, extended but temporary leaves, sabbatical, military service, transfer of a job, winding up of an estate. Those are the 4 that are specifically called out, and then I kind of provided a little bit of an avenue there for somebody to come in and say, well, I don't really have one of those, but I have something that looks kind of like those. Will you approve it? So there's a little bit of a opportunity there, you might say. But what this says is that this permit could be issued no longer than 2 years, and yeah, that's what it says. We made quite a few additions to information that will be required in the rental permit, including certifications about post-secondary enrollment, ages of tenants, because the ordinances now provide for parking space for every 18 or older tenant, so we need to get that information. I'll work with Stan and Chris as we put this rental permit application together to make sure that information is
How does that provision impact families who are tenants? Does it reach families with a family of 6 teens and only 4 parking spaces?
But they have to be, so it would impact them. The trigger is 18 years or older. So.
Okay, suppose they're all 18 years old or older. Kids that are coming back to live with their parents, and kids that are off at freshmen's. I'm concerned about family units, because unlike 1, 2, 3, 4 tenants who aren't in a familiar setting, they can't quite disband. So essentially we're creating a situation where landlords are turning away families on account of too many 18-year-old and above children that parking space can't be found for.
Yeah, well,
Is there any way we can work with language to leave families intact?
So the first thing I would say is those ordinance changes were already adopted. I was just talking about the change to require a description of how old people were in the permit, but the change that said that there has to be a parking space for every tenant over 18, that was adopted in December.
Okay.
Doesn't mean it
take a
can't
look
be
at it.
changed,
Right.
but yeah.
Do you see a lot of families with
West
6
of Sunset,
with 6 kids over 18 living?
maybe 2
So
families.
18, 19, 20, 21, 22,
Yeah,
23,
maybe.
all
Yeah.
with cars.
all with
Maybe.
cars, all living in.
Not necessarily with cars, but the trigger is that you have to provide a car space. Some of those kids don't drive, which is one of the concerns that I'm thinking
Sure.
that should offset
Right.
and favor the equation of preserving that
We could
family intact.
tie
if not,
those.
we're driving
Sure.
away.
Yeah, I get that, and you don't want to over require parking. You could tie the, because you're not looking at a 7-bedroom house there. You could tie it back into bedrooms. That if you had 4 bedrooms, that you would require 3 spaces. That's what we're proposing in Iowa City at this point.
Okay. Yeah. So I know at least 2 families that may have that profile where they have more kids than parking spaces.
But they're all over 18 and all living in the house at
Yeah,
this
it's
point.
at different points in the household, or all at the same time at some season. So maybe we can talk about this at the work session, and I can get you scenarios that I would be concerned about. Otherwise, I don't want to be the city that is so selective that we are shooing away our families that are larger sized.
So the next, I guess in my mind, kind of big change starts. It's on page 9 of this proposed ordinance. It's subsection 11 to section 110.05, And Section 11 or subsection 11 and the next several subsections incorporates and implements this sort of sanction procedure and code compliance meetings and the kind of process that the council talked about and directed or approved. You know, if people are, if tenants are getting arrested for intox or drugs or whatever, and it happens a couple times, then they sit down with Stan and have a meeting. And if Stan thinks other people need to be there, he can bring them, city staff, that is. But that implements kind of that whole process.
And we didn't just invent this. I mean, we've taken this from Iowa City. It's been proven to work over the past 10 years. When Iowa City implemented it 12 some years ago, everybody thought the sky was falling and that there'd be vacant rental properties and kids would move out, and it hasn't. It's provided a very good forum to have those discussions and, you know, spell out expectations after there's been a default.
I think it's a good idea, especially now with the plague of drugs and the opioid crisis, and the fact that some of the complaints might be really serious and life-threatening or life-changing, so that, you know, a reasonable discussion and counseling session would be a very positive thing rather than punitive.
Yeah, a lot of times when drugs are involved, they find other housing because they're housed at the jail. But
Right.
alcohol-related offenses and things that are causing disturbances in the neighborhoods, it's proven to be very effective.
And then the last big section, I guess, in my mind, is on page 16 of the proposed ordinance. It's section 110.05A, and it provides for rent abatement, particular circumstances, and these are severe, extreme circumstances: failure to provide essential service like water, sewer, electricity, failure to remedy a condition that poses a substantial risk to health or safety, renting a dwelling unit without a rental permit. And what it gives the city the ability to do is to abate rent and basically tell landlords you can't charge your tenants rent, and tell tenants you don't have to pay your landlord rent. Doesn't doesn't permit the landlord to evict the tenant. City doesn't get the rent. Nobody gets it. The tenant just doesn't pay it. Landlord doesn't get it after they've remedied the situation, assuming they do. Iowa Code allows the city to do this, and it's again something that, talking with Stan, talking with the council, the direction was to incorporate this, but Iowa City has incorporated this as well. So
I think it's a good idea.
It's important to note that it's a city-initiated action. Tenants just can't show up and say, we're going to abate the rent today. There's some misconception out there, and it's been tried that way, but it has to be city-initiated, and I will...
What does that look like?
We're made aware of a problem, and I'll bring over my policies from Iowa City. We present notice to the tenant. They're given, or excuse me, to the tenant and the landlord. And if the landlord is different than the owner, to the owner also. So tenant, landlord, owner, all three of those parties. They're given 10 days to correct. If it's not corrected in those 10 days, the rent is abated back to that 10-day period moving forward. So, I mean, there's clear communication to the tenant, to the landlord, to the property owner that this is going on.
And so that's sort of a quick overview, I guess I would say, of Ordinance 223 and the changes it makes to the rental housing code.
So Stan, you'll share with us your policies so that we can see what they look like. My concern is if the city's going to be involved, who makes the call that this is a proper scenario for abatement? That's a pretty big call. Who makes it? I mean, if the city's involved, do we?
Your housing inspector. So I mean, it's spelled out in the ordinance. I mean, it has to be a substantial reason. I mean, if the sewer line collapses and they're not fixing it, that's an issue. If the water line has been shut off due to landlord action because there's a leak, that's a pretty big issue. If there's a major electrical issue, and the idea is that you want to give the tenant some time to react to it, that they're not out on the curb immediately, so that they're probably not going to stay there, honestly. But it gives them opportunity to react to it.
Okay.
We implemented it because we had housing code issues that we would have vacated buildings, except it was December, and it's very hard to remove tenants in December. So, I mean, that's...
Yeah. Okay.
This will be used very rarely.
Are there any other cities besides Iowa City that you feel comfortable that maybe we can look at, or do you have any other need to look at? Is there any other?
I don't think I'll do the research on that again. I don't think any other Iowa cities, even though it's in the Iowa code, I don't think any other Iowa cities have adopted it at this point.
Okay.
Steve can maybe do a.
Yeah, I've
Not
been-
necessary. I think there's a tenant law center out of Des Moines that I need to connect with. So, so I can ask them. Who
Right.
else?
And also to not disagree with Steve, but tenants still can be evicted if they have a non-payment of rent situation outside of the abatement, or they've done something as a lease violation outside of that abatement, they can be evicted yet. So
Thanks. That's a good clarification.
It's not.
Yeah.
It weighs both sides for tenant and landlord.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
I mean,
my point was if the landlord says, "Oh, your city's telling you not to pay rent," well, I'm going to evict you.
right,
For not paying your
right.
rent.
You can't be evicted for the abatement. Yep.
That's a good clarification.
Okay, Steve, can you give a timeline moving forward so the public knows when they can
You bet.
express an input? Yeah.
So on a timeline moving forward, the items 5 and 6 on Stan's list and in the chart that I put in the legal report, this idea of defining a parking lot more than 4 spaces and regulating or restricting that. There's nothing in the proposed ordinances that I've prepared that addresses that. So if that's something that's on the council's mind for this go around, be thinking about that and please provide me with some direction. And then the other things that are highlighted in blue is needing some further direction. And my sense is that these aren't as immediate as the other things, but one was the short-term rental, Airbnb, VRBO, that kind of thing. Kind of what does the council want to see done there? And then the last 3 items, which are bigger picture, encouraging reinvestment and so forth. Those are the items that were in blue. Timeline with respect to the proposed ordinances. You've extended the moratorium on new permits in the R1 zone to the end of March. So I would, this is the first time that the concepts the council has discussed have been put into writing and available for people to look at and chew over and make comment on. But the concepts certainly aren't new. So how quickly the council wants to move, I'll leave to the council. Unless the council collapses readings of the ordinances, there would need to be 3 meetings at which they would be considered. So if the council desires to wait until the March meeting, which is early, I guess it's what,
March 6th.
3 weeks from tonight, does that make it? Yeah. If that's your first consideration,
3 weeks.
if you want to have a special meeting, you could do that. However you want to do it. But I guess in terms of the moratorium, I would encourage you to, if you intend to adopt something along the lines of Ordinance 223, that you do that before March 31.
I think there are a lot of people here that want to hear about parking. I'd like to talk about parking tonight. I don't know, Stan, would you be willing to give kind of an overview of what your 5 and 6 are, and if you have that with you or in your memory, And then I would be interested in hearing what the council has to say and then possibly giving direction to update the ordinance to take those into account.
Sure. I think the concern is commercial parking in residential areas. And anytime you get above that 4-car limit, is that more commercial or is that more residential? And if you are going to allow it, under what conditions would you allow it? You run into stormwater runoff onto adjoining properties. With that, you end up with people paving the entire backyard because it's easier to maintain in certain situations. We've heard about delineation tonight, but would you require raised barriers in the future, screening, all of those things if you were going to continue to allow paving and parking in backyards? That's the general premise of it.
Is what being, we've heard a little bit about what's being done right now. Is that consistent with our current ordinances to have the big parking lots?
I think Steve can answer that one.
Yeah, I mean, yes. When Mike Ritchie talked about the demarcations, that was a kind of a saga, and our ordinance at the time didn't prohibit pavement because it said you could kind of have a patio of any size, but it did prohibit parking. And through looking at sort of historical photographs and so forth, it was pretty easy to see that on that particular property there was always a driveway, and so it was a pretty good assumption that cars had always parked in this particular area, and so that was grandfathered pursuant to the pre-existing non-conforming use section of the zoning ordinance. But the city said, okay, so you've paved more than that, and you can only park on the part that was grandfathered. But if somebody wheels into your pavement, they're not going to know that. So draw a line, tell them where they can and can't park. And by the way, just as Mike said, he got the message. By the way, the police department's going to know that if they're not within that line, they can be ticketed. So that's that particular episode. Tim Lehman's property on Melrose was, there's if you read the zoning ordinance, there's that property. Depending on which angle you look at it, it does kind of look like the backyard's paved. That property has a garage that enters from the back. It's an underground garage, and there's a specific provision in the zoning ordinance that says that if you have an underground garage, then you can have access from your rear yard, and you can also, so there's it's a driveway, so to speak. If you look at it from a particular angle, it probably does look like somebody just paved the whole backyard, but that's why that one is permitted.
How about the home right across from Stella's, the brown house?
The brown house right across from Stella it was the subject of Board of Adjustment consideration, and through efforts of the building official Terry Gert, myself, and the property owner. So we basically said to the property owner, if you're going to tell us that this is kind of a grandfathered use, you got to prove it to us. And frankly, he did. He got, and I have this, and I'm happy to share it with anyone. But the prior owner that went back, his ownership preceded the zoning ordinance. Had diagrams and photographs of how the property had been used from a long, long time ago. The big change was that the current owner, Mr. Lubenthal, had changed it from a lot of gravel and some pavement or permanent surface to all asphalt. And of course that caught everybody's attention, I think. The use wasn't much different, I don't think. I think it had been parking the whole time. The ordinance, as it has evolved over time, but from the beginning, there was a real presumption and a push to make things permanent surface, not gravel, all right? And so at the end of the day, as we looked at it, you had a use that didn't change. He did not enlarge the places that he was parking or where people had parked. Those were grandfathered. What he changed was he made asphalt what had been, gravel. And our view was that that's what the ordinance kind of asks you to do, and so the decision was that that was a grandfathered use.
Well, I have a question, Steve. Also on Olive, the backyards of the houses on Olive up toward the Lytham development, and that apartment complex or two, I think it's an out-of-town business that owns it. That backyard or those backyards are all concrete. It's a blight. Now, isn't there any way that we can condemn it or whatever to make that more of a residential backyard, which it should be, rather than a commercial?
I think so. I'm not sure I'm familiar with those particular properties.
Mm-hmm.
These are at the end of the alley, so to speak.
Yeah, as the buildings that are at the end of Olive on the east side of the street that are up toward the Lytham development, up by the white fence there that becomes Lytham.
But some of those are
Those are Iowa City.
right.
No, before you get to Iowa City, they're University Heights.
Right, but like University Heights doesn't go on the east side.
No,
it doesn't go all the way to Lytham.
Right, but the apartment building up there is University Heights.
No.
No.
It's
Iowa
not.
City. It's
It's
owned by a
Iowa
doctor
City.
in Texas or somewhere
So
south.
where does it end then?
Next house.
Yeah.
They're all concrete back there. Whether
Next house to the south. It ends.
it's a big apartment dwelling.
Two of them, I think.
It's hideous. If we want it to be a residential community, all that concrete is really not conducive.
So that would be my timeline. Is you've given yourself till the end of March, and how you want to go about it in terms of special meeting or meeting on March 6th, or I'll leave it to you.
Okay. Did you want to speak a little more about parking, or
Well,
did somebody,
Yeah,
council?
I don't know if anybody else. on
Maybe council.
Had comments about that. I mean, I think it would be, generally, I think it would be a good idea to give landlords especially a vision of what we are working towards. So it's not, this restriction and then adding later that restriction. I think there's a pretty uniform idea, tell me if I'm wrong, that we're trying to have this community look more residential, function more in a more residential way. I hear about parking lots in yards probably as much as I hear about anything, honestly. And so I guess I just don't know fully what to do with it. I think that the garage in the rear, I totally understand that you're going to need a driveway to get around and get down there, The perception is that there are parking lots in backyards and that those are the opposite of fostering a residential community because, they're not, I mean, I know we had the preference to kind of pave, but I think a lot of people too are seeing the more paving you have, the more you have runoff, and we've been talking about runoff issues in other contexts too. So I don't know that I have the final answer. I'm just trying to start the discussion so that we are all moving in the same direction on this issue. Stan's suggestions, I think, seem to be a good starting point. And I guess that's what I'm wondering, if we should be integrating those into the new ordinance now so that we're considering that at the same time.
I think the comment that I'm concerned about, and I agree with you on the residential character, is the uses. So focusing back onto our property, I think we've made a community statement this past election that the emphasis on retaining, promoting, supporting, and enhancing what it means to be a residential town. We have chosen not to be mixed use. We have chosen not to be high density. We have chosen to be residential in character. And so one of the things that's come up clearly in conversation from hearing our landlords show up at council is that parking during the non-football game days is an added revenue stream for them. So my concern is, that's a use that we haven't contemplated as a community, We contemplated rentals, yeah. That's why we allow permits. We contemplated owner-occupied homes. That's why they're not rentals. And we contemplated football game day parking, which it's questionable, according to Pat Bauer, whether or not consideration can be exchanged, meaning money. But the fourth question that is a real stickler here, and that I think council needs to draw a line on the sand is, are we going to start allowing additional uses as commercial parking lots? I mean, the fact that, you have to use the backyard in order to access your back garage and all that, I get that. But must you use the remainder of the property for additional profit that's outside of what it means to be a rental home or a rental property? So when our folks in town sell their homes, they're selling their homes either, one, as Mike Ritchie has told us, as a rental property with rental income and football income. And you have, Jane Doe who sells her home for nothing more than just a home on the market in University Heights. So I think for me, we need to give some guidance to anyone involved, including owner-occupied individuals who are commercially renting out their driveways, as well as our landlords. Which is it? Are we going to start allowing additional uses of a property? Because if we are, we might as well start allowing, lemonade stands in front of the front yard so that you can sell and vend to the public. Why not a taco truck or a hot dog truck in front of your yard as well? So I think it's another use that needs some attention, and I think we should circle back to this concept of residential character and what fosters and enhances and promotes and encourages residential behavior. And I don't see residential behavior as incompatible with a rental. I think some of our tenants are excellent contributors to our community. They've lived here for, the ones that I'm thinking about are close to a decade. So, they're part of our community and our fiber. But are the tenants who are renting a parking space at the same level? So I think that's a policy consideration that we're all going to have to discuss and take ownership
And
for.
we're working on some open space requirements in Iowa City, and it's very preliminary, but there's some information that I can get to you about that. And it's not retroactive, but if you're looking to redevelop the house or expand the house, that you have to be in conformance with the new open space requirements. And the idea is that there's a balance between the house, that you have parking, you have the house, but yet you have open green space where other activities can take place. So you set this standard, and there's an expectation that if it was a new development, it would meet that, or if it's a redevelopment of the property, it would meet that. And then, of course, there's certain properties that won't, meet it, and there's parameters that are set to allow for that also if there's an expansion or redevelopment.
Okay.
I like both those ideas. I think another idea I just want to insert into the conversation is I don't know that I'm thinking about someone who, say they live alone or have one car or have no cars. I don't know that restricting them from selling their spots, if they have four, if they have a driveway that's two cars wide or a double garage or, whatever, I don't know that prohibiting them from selling a spot or two is a bad thing if they've taken the decision not to have as many cars for themselves.
Right.
I mean, I don't know if that's defeating any of the purposes that we're trying to accomplish here. I do hear Sylvia's distinction though in terms of running kind of this separate company in a sense to park cars.
I think you can make a determination between an incidental use or an accessory use to the property versus 4, 6, 8 cars is obviously could be considered a commercial use. I think there's a line that you can draw there.
Do you think you have enough information from us to kind of take the next step?
Yep.
Okay.
Can we?
I think, Stan, you've already said that the number of bedrooms should direct the number of parking places.
Well, I've had a change in thought on that. I think, again, we're changing years of occupancy standards here. You have to realize that this is going to be a living document for the next 2 years. So as you're contemplating some of these things, you should keep that in mind, that you might have a hard and fast view of something now that in 6 months to a year, because of how we've seen how people have reacted to it, you're going to have to make changes. The parking thing is one. I think it was an option to base it off of adults over 18 in the property. I think there's a concern that you could end up with excessive parking at the property because of that. So there's some things that you need to weigh there. And as we go on, we get better information sometimes. And yeah, bedrooms is one of the ways that you can look at it. That you can say a typical size bedroom requires, if you have 4 typical size bedrooms, it requires 3 parking spaces. If they have more than that, then you have to ask, are they available for rent? Are you going to regulate that?
How to manage.
One of the things, I'm sorry.
But you could, the parking lot standards and all that, you can add, I think you can add some of that as you go along. I don't know how critical it is to have that set.
Yeah. I don't know, you all get the complaints and more than I do, especially since Stan has been involved as a code compliance person for the city. But in the past, a lot of the complaints that the council received and that I received related to just the sheer number of vehicles. There was a tight end actually who went on to play in the NFL that his family owned a home on Melrose, and they had a pretty good paved area, and they were close to the football stadium, the practice facility, and so like a lot of the team parked there. So there were like a bunch of mopeds and a bunch of cars, none of them on the grass, so they're all legal. But then at that time, complaints were just sort of like, well, why can all those cars be parked there? And we said, well, there's occupancy restrictions, but we don't have restrictions on people parking cars, So I don't know if those complaints are common, and I don't know how much that. And in that case, they weren't charging anything, I don't think. But I don't know, where the community is on those kinds of issues. But in the past, that has been a big issue. In fact, there was a comment made during the January 23 meeting that the city did say, "Hey, quit spilling a bunch of gravel into what should be your front yard and calling it a parking area. You've got to have a paved parking area. And by the way, you can't just put one wherever you want." So that's part of the evolution here too.
Okay.
But I have enough that I can bring something back. It's probably, it won't be by the March meeting, but.
Right. So Stan, from my perspective, just to be clear, I'd be interested in seeing, for example, having an objective standard that applies across properties, regardless of whether they're rentals or not.
Yep.
Otherwise, it's going to get really difficult for enforcement. Right. And that'll be it for me. I don't know if anybody else has any other guidance for Stan. You might come back with option A, B, C, and D. I don't know.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Stan. Thank you, Steve. I'm gonna see if maybe we don't need a break at the end of this page. I'll just ask that question. But my mayor's report, I submitted a written report, and so we'll go to Pat Bauer on the zoning commission report.
You may remember that the Zoning Commission met in early December at Council's request. We came forth with a recommendation that Council asked the engineer to prepare some diagrams of the potential development possible on the Swisher Tract. The engineer came back last week with those diagrams that are now available on the city's website. The available members of the Zoning Commission are meeting this Thursday, 5 o'clock here in the community center, along with the city engineer and the city attorney, to go through those diagrams, and we'll report to council as to whether the zoning commission believes any further regulatory measures are appropriate in either direction, more development, less development, or whether what's possible under existing ordinances is just right.
Any questions for Pat? Thank you. Steve, did you have anything else with your legal report? I think there were a couple other items, but maybe they're on the agenda later on.
I think they're on the agenda.
I do too.
Yep.
Okay, we'll have the clerk's report.
I sent out my report as well as the updated building report, or spreadsheet, excuse me. Obviously, there's a moratorium on the rental permit spreadsheets. And to Stan and Steve's point, yes, we will be bonding because I still have a lot of questions. And I guess a rental permit that we need to update to include a lot of information. So I see that on the horizon.
Okay. Any questions for Chris? Okay.
Can I have a point of?
Sure.
I'm not looking for a vote, but I'm looking for some head nods. The safe harbor. Do any of the council members have an issue with safe harbor for rental permits where you've had a resident who's lived here, is going to be gone for a year, and is looking,
or maybe two,
maybe two, yes, but definitely for a year, who's looking to rent their property? Is anyone opposed to the idea of a temporary rental permit in those situations?
I'm fine with that idea.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm fine, but the only thing I'd like to make sure is that the city is well positioned to track it as a temporary, like an RT1 rental,
Yep.
temporary one, or something.
Yeah, that's
Coding. Yeah. Why do you ask?
Because we've had a request, and it's
Is
they.
that the one on Grand?
Yeah, they have a fellowship in
Yeah.
Ann Arbor, and
Nope.
I was able to walk through, and there's some it's a great house, and they've taken good care of it, and they're looking at getting another resident in while they're gone, and
No, I think that's
okay.
exactly.
I just
I think
don't
that
want
was
to
the exact.
misstate, but at the same point,
Right,
it's a
they're
couple that needs to have some assurances. So okay, thanks.
Sylvia, you probably don't have anything to add to finance
No, I will.
at this time, but
I will table the farmers market as well, and just go to the resolution.
okay,
It's a couple of discussion items that do have impact,
sure.
but I'll just skip everything on the finance report for next month. It's 9:10.
You'll skip everything.
No, I need to speak to ordinance
Yes.
222
Okay,
and discussion on. I'll table code of conduct,
okay,
but I will discuss length of council meetings,
okay,
the board liaison.
okay,
I need to get that discussion out.
okay. So
And we'll just, third ordinance, 214, we'll table it. So,
I can keep going, but if does anybody want a 5-minute break?
Sure.
But I can
5-minute break,
Keep-
sure.
5-minute break.
And I can coordinate
Okay.
the agenda.
Very good. We're going to take a 5-minute break. Well, 4-minute. We'll be back at 10 after 9. So she's tabled the discussion on the code of conduct. She's tabled the third consideration of the Culture, Arts, and Rec Commission, and she's tabled the farmers market. So the council's all back. 1, 2, 3.
We're
Nope.
missing Dottie.
Dottie's missing. But
Hey, did you want to
we should probably wait for Dottie here.
Discussed last night.
Yeah, we're
in your report?
We're tabling
Okay.
We got-
14.
we're doing one, and then we're skipping 2, and then we're doing the next one, and the next one, and the next one. Then we're tabling the last 2.
That is what I need. Thank you.
Is that what you got? Okay. And the finance report, she's going to do a PowerPoint. So she's tabling that for now. So, then I'm just looking ahead, and a lot of this
Does anybody else need to table anything else? Or can we adopt any of these other items through a motion of a consent agenda addition?
let's see. Under community protection, she has they have third consideration of ordinance 216.
Can we table that? Nick,
Sure. Does Nick, are you in favor of tabling that? Are you in favor of tabling it?
It's 9:10, 9:15.
If we're tabling all of this, then we can table that.
Is there much discussion on 216?
No.
I feel that they don't want to table it. So then, okay, Dottie's back. So why don't you go ahead, Sylvia, and talk about first consideration of ordinance 222.
All right. Ordinance 222 is equal voices, leveling the playing field for the public good. This ordinance is a response to the concerns that were identified in January's regular scheduled meeting, where we had a counselor who expressed an interest that even if we have an elected official who sits on this table and has business before them in which they have a economic interest or some member of their family has an interest in that action, that they should continue to speak and discuss and engage in conversation and discourse. And I get that is important to hear what that elected official has to say. However, I'm trying to balance out the public good of the community, which is the emphasis on having elected officials that are making discussion and influencing discussion and eventually voting on matters for the best interest of the community and completely and hopefully removed from any other personal agenda or personal gain. So with this ordinance, what it does is it takes into consideration the comments that were received in January, in particular yours, Nick, where you would like to hear from everyone, but I'm proposing this time around through equal voices that we have individual elected officials with a conflict of interest speak for the same time frame and in the same forum in which a member of the public who doesn't participate in elected official discussions and discourse, influence, and voting, and just change them on the other side. That way there's a clear separation between when there's no additional advantage to that counselor being on the council table. So for example, a scenario would be you don't have an elected official speaking for 15 minutes on a topic that Mike Ritchie, who just showed up this evening, only had 5 minutes to speak on. So you're leveling the playing field between an elected official who has a conflict. You're still hearing him out or her out, but they're at the podium and they are subject to the same restrictions as any other resident who shows up to make a public comment on the issue.
I guess I'm just trying to figure out what this is all about. I mean, we had this issue come up, I think with the last council, and the conflict of interest, language I think was changed to not go there. As you referenced, it was brought up when we talked about this again. I don't fully know what this is going after. I know that there have been examples that people in the audience have raised. We had the rental permit discussion. I know there was, discussion, well, do council members own rentals? And that was not something that was raised in any way. So I guess I just would like to hear more about why this continues to come up. Is there a certain conflict that you think one of us has?
Nope, it's not impinging anybody's character. It's not going after anybody's character. As a matter of fact, it's addressing the urgency and the need to recognize that in the next 24 months, the city is going to be receiving property taxes and tax motel revenue from a very high commercial enterprise. And what this suggests is that we need to have the best appearance of proprietary, of conduct, of a code of ethics, so to speak, which is tabled for the next session. But one of the things that we need to concern ourselves is that if and when there is an elected official in the future, when hundreds of thousands of dollars will be involved in going out to this direction, that direction, or the other direction, we want to make sure that that elected official doesn't use their seat at the table to unduly influence the conversation, the votes, or hold the audience captive to unlimited amount of discourse that is coming from an individual who has an interest in the outcome. So that this by no means means that there is somebody on council now who's doing that. I'm not aware of. As a matter of fact, we all signed our conflicts of interest disclosure in January, and one of the rules is you're supposed to self-disclose as a matter of ethical conduct to the council and act according to Ordinance 193. Ordinance 222 just equals the level, the playing field for everyone involved. It gives no additional advantage to an official who is sitting up here managing hundreds of thousands of dollars for the city, and it sets up a higher degree of trust and accountability by the public if they're speaking from the forum and under the same time frame.
Sylvia, I have a question. Yeah. Distinguishing this from the conflicts of interest policy that we have or that you proposed, if that conflicts policy included people recusing themselves from any discussion after they had declared conflict, would that satisfy your concern?
I think that's the common practice. That is the recommended practice from a number of advocacy groups that are.
Because our conflicts policy, if it exists, I don't know if it was ever passed.
It was. You voted on it.
It's not complete. Mm-hmm. It's not correct.
That's right.
So I would recommend amending that.
I think this one, 222, satisfies the compromise, or what I heard to be a potential ability for Nick to consider a hearing from a conflicted party. All I'm saying, if you're going to hear from a conflicted party, make sure it's on equal leveled ground as someone from a member of the public who was told today you only have 5 minutes and you can only speak once. So if those are the rules for members of the public with no conflicts of interest, then being an elected official shouldn't give you a privilege to overextend your position on an issue.
But if you're an elected official and you declare that you have a conflict, then you should recuse yourself from any discussion. And I don't believe our policy states that.
You're correct. And we had no support in January to modify the ordinance at all in that direction. And if I recall, it was because there was an interest, specifically from you, Nick, to hear from a conflicted elected official. All I'm saying is I think we found a happy medium here that is fair and equitable to the elected official with a conflict, that puts him or her at the same level as a resident who shows up, possibly maybe also with a conflict, but they just happen to be not elected, and they're timed out and they can only speak from the podium.
No, I get it, and I understand what you're getting. I understand the balance you're trying to strike. The first thing I would say is we just received this for the first time. I like the idea of talking about things and then deciding to vote on them potentially at the first meeting, but usually probably there's going to be a little discussion. I would like to go back and talk to people about this and see if this is a concern. I also want to encourage people who have conflicts to disclose them. And I think again, the discussion with like the rental permit issue, I can imagine there are going to be other situations where people have conflicts. I don't want to be too draconian about it so that they will disclose them. And so I guess that's just what's been kind of surprising to me, is that there hasn't been the issue come up yet. And I guess I'm concerned we're looking for a fix when there's not anything broken, but I appreciate the time that's put into this. I will go talk to people about it and see what people have to say about it.
Well, every board that I have ever sat on has, at the beginning of the meeting, a request for disclosure if there's any conflict. And if there is a conflict, then that person recuses themselves. but they also will not participate in any discussion, or they may choose to leave the room.
Right, and lawyers are under that same
So they
recusal
should
obligation.
not be discussing anything because they will be persuading other people to their point of view. So it's very simple. It's clean and simple.
And the objective for this is not necessarily because I want to smoke out anybody right now at the table. If you didn't sign in good faith the January statement that you are aware of the 191 conflicts of interest policy, then what's it worth, right? There's no integrity behind the signing. This is about setting up the city in the right path. We are about to become a very wealthy city. We're earning $2.1 million in revenue that we take in and we're expending out. I think, and we're also a very small town. If we had a larger swath of residents to work with, and probably the odds, wouldn't be there that we'd have a conflict of interest. But because we're very small and we're about to start handling even more money, I think we need to have a structure of governance that promotes transparency in the votes, discussions, and actions of its elected officials. That's all.
Yeah, and I guess as a spectator last year when this was being debated, I looked at it as being a personality conflict between two people on council. That was my concern at the time. I thought it was, at the time, it seemed to be smoking somebody out. And I guess part of my aversion to it was I didn't want to, make an issue out of, kind of continue on a debate from the last council when it seemed like it was kind of based in conflict from the last council. I was hoping we were just going to move forward. We all signed, I think everybody signed at the same meeting at the beginning of the year, the conflict disclosure statement. And that's certainly what I would plan to do if I had a conflict.
And that's super awesome.
And so,
yeah.
So, and two, like we've talked about, I appreciated hearing Dottie's feedback on the rental program. I know she has a rental unit. I don't know that I would have changed anything about that. I know there was some comments in the audience about it. That is kind of the extent to my view on this right now. But I'm happy to talk to people about this and see if this is something, that they want to do in terms of limiting council members. I think a lot of, like many laws, if people, operated in the appropriate way, you wouldn't need the law. It's in some ways like some of these parking and rental issues. We're brainstorming laws because people have decided to put huge parking lots in a residential area, for example. So again, I was kind of listening carefully to whether there was a problem before we took time on crafting a solution. But
And I'll be happy to tell you the big problem, because it has nothing to do with personalities and it has everything to do with the TIF award of $6.7 million in 2015. The council, on the first reading awarding $6.7 million, refused to even entertain discussion on a conflicts of interest ordinance. A number of residents wanted to know if any member of this council, of the then sitting council, was in the pocket of the developer. Super, good question to ask, good question to clear up and quickly say yes or no. You either have a conflict or you don't. But that particular council killed the resolution to even bring it up to discussion. So right now we are discussing that other resolution, didn't manage to get discussion, and it got shot down. So as a result, it just picked up even more momentum from individuals who were very concerned that was a huge, easy consideration for the then acting council to have executed, signed, and put in place before the city awarded millions of property tax rebates over the course of 15, 18 years.
Would this have solved the problem though, or would they have?
Sure, you would have. You would have.
Well, listen.
Presumably, they would have signed the initial form. They would have disclosed the conflict initially. So the question would have been, we assume they would have already disclosed the conflict. So it would have been how much time. I think what this would be about is how much time they can talk on the issue, right?
No.
No.
Back then it was Iowa Law gets a D+ from Transparency International, which is a nonprofit that monitors transparency in exactly these types of issues. So that's Iowa's score.
It's also,
but
it's a matter of
let me
personal
speak.
integrity. It's not so much what does the residential community think. It's that we are given our responsibility to act on their behalf. And it's an integrity issue as to whether you have a conflict. Only you know. And so each of us has that responsibility as a part of our function.
Right.
I don't disagree with that. I guess I was just asking, there was an ordinance passed already to address this last year.
At the time the TIF was awarded,
There
that
wasn't
ordinance
one.
does not apply.
Right. So I'm just saying if at the time you're talking about, if the current ordinance would have been in place, there would have been disclosure, there should have been disclosure of the conflict at that time. And if there wasn't a disclosure of the conflict, then this new addition limiting the person to how long they can speak wouldn't have made a difference, presumably.
Because presumably they didn't have a conflict. Right. But that was not the position that was taken. So, additionally, University Heights is a leader in conflicts of interest disclosure because we do better than what Iowa Code provides for. A minimum standard with the Iowa Code, that's why it gets the grade it does. But we pick up a higher standard of ethical performance and integrity check on our elected officials.
All right, and so
that's what irritated a majority of residents, was that so much money was approved and authorized through a 4-1 vote, and there was no heed to a basic disclosure level that many of our residents have to disclose because they work with the University of Iowa. They apply for grants through the feds or state resources, many of which are even more thorough than what we have. They ask for your bank account statements, your cash in and cash out while you're in office or a grantee. And so there was a great deal of disturbance with residents who are well aware what the prevailing standard for conflicts of interest is in, and they found it odd that in a town that has university as part of its namesake, we didn't rise to the occasion, even on a controversial issue. And so I've been trying to essentially propose the ordinance, which was passed, with the other group, the new group of counselors, and now I'm trying to pass a last gap in that ordinance, at least to a compromise between your interest and my interest in balancing out an elected official's undue influence, which the code of conduct, we will be discussing that because it's been tabled, but we'll be talking about that.
And I don't have an interest. I am just here. When I've talked to people about this, the concern has been that this is not doing anything except for perpetuating kind of a conflict that was involved with previous city council. And so I'm not against the general principles that I think I'm hearing you articulate. It's just that I want to talk to people about these reasons and hear if there is support for this idea as a standalone issue, or if there is still the feeling out there that this additional add-on is just, again, continuing on a perception of a personality conflict from before, accusations that people should have.
So you want more time? Sylvia wants.
I'm amenable to that.
Okay.
In the interest of public discourse, I say go for it, because as I just want to caution you that when I first introduced the very first round of conflicts of interest, it died because there wasn't even a courtesy second to open up discussion. It just died. And we moved on to the next item.
And
so, Madam Mayor, I'll just table this to the next agenda, the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. So then we'll go to discussion of length of council meetings. And you wanted to speak on that, Sylvia?
So I'll time myself on this topic, but I've been getting a couple of comments from folks that, they start viewing a few of our videos, but then they time out and they move on. And they would really like to see council stay a little bit more on track with what we have to say. So I started researching, what do other cities and what other organizations do to keep on track. And it just so happened that the League of Iowa City had an article on consent agendas, which is a tool that operates to consolidate many items such as engineering, such as legal, such as housing reports. Even the farmers market report today could be under the consolidated agenda. And we all unanimously vote on it. What that does is that it removes those items that are non-controversial, for information only, off the discussion table, and it frees up your time by however much amount of time each of those agenda items presents. Since we happen to be a city that adopted the Roberts Rules of Order, we are allowed as a council to adopt a consent agenda, which I think is called a scheduled calendar. And we could start using that in the next, maybe not this month coming up, but the next one. And we can see if that shortens up our council meetings by about half an hour to 45 minutes. But it does mean that if any member of council feels that any item that's on that consent agenda is worthy of discussion, they can take it away from the consent agenda grouping and make it an item of discussion. But that's just a technicality, but it's an offer that I think we need to try to see if we can't cut down our 3.5, 4-hour meetings down to maybe 2 hours. It's an ambitious goal, but I think we can do it. There's also, in the background, it would require that as council, we start reporting earlier to the mayor and the clerk so that they can publish the agenda earlier. And that means that once the councilors start seeing the agenda, they're able to say, I really don't want that report unanimously adopted. I want to remember to pull it and discuss it. And so that's what it would do. So if there's any interest in that, I can pursue and bring, what is it, a write-up of what that would look like for our administrative manual. Mm-hmm. I could bring in a sample of several other cities who have done consent agendas.
I attend many meetings that use that.
Yeah, North Liberty, Iowa City, Tiffin. You'd be surprised. We use it, but we only use it for the minutes. So now I'm saying let's use it for a lot more than just the minutes, and hopefully wrap up those items in about 30 minutes. So that's it. Any comments or interest?
No, go ahead.
I think that would generally be fine. I hope that isn't an excuse to then pile in a bunch of stuff that we don't necessarily, want to wade through anyway. But I mean, I think the general principle makes sense.
Yeah, the general principle only operates if it's for information only. So if you have a policy issue disguising as a consent agenda, I think you have a problem with the counselor doing that.
So is council interested in her bringing back more information? That's what you suggested, right? Mm-hmm. Is there a consensus on that? Or are you interested in thinking about it, reading about it?
As the mayor, what are your thoughts as the person who sets up the agenda?
I didn't know what she was going to say here, so I'd like to read about it some more and talk to some other people who do it. I mean, we do it at several meetings. I don't know if you noticed, but in my mayor's report, I attend a lot of meetings every month, and I don't see it helping a lot in shortening the meetings sometimes, but I'd like to look at it a little more.
Yeah.
Maybe
I don't think it's a bad idea.
Would be for the 5-minute limit to apply to everyone.
Well, I think you got some direction that we'll look at it.
Okay.
Some more and consider it. And then we're going to move to discussion of City One University Place Association Board Liaison appointment.
This right here is for the background information. The developer's agreement with the Maxwell team and the city entitles the city to have one liaison, one permanent position on the board for the condominium association, the north and the south side. Forever, until we sell this spot, we will have a place at the table for the board of directors for the condo association. Last we discussed this with the prior council, Jim Lane was appointed to manage that position. And second to that was in tandem with Clayton Hargrave. Now that Jim is selling his property to move away from University Heights, I think it's the right time to start transitioning this position to Clayton, who had offered his time and service to sit on this board and be a liaison for the city. So I think we need to start planning succession planning, and what I would like to do, because this was also an outstanding item, is we need to have a job description for this position, because in reviewing the condo association rules, they can the members of the board may cause the city to vote on financial issues. And as of right now, as of today, I haven't seen any report from the condo association meetings that may or may not have taken place since we last spoke about the subject.
And
so
as part of the job description, availability all the time is a factor.
Yeah, but they are able to dial in, have phone conferences.
Well,
So
I think we need to know what the condominium association thinks is important.
I did email, since you had this on the agenda, I did email Jim Lane, and he said we hadn't had any meetings. I had agreed to bring Clayton with me if we did have meetings. He said he would continue until he moved out of town if you want, and give you some time. But he was always intending on bringing Clayton with him if there were a meeting.
No doubt. I just haven't heard anything further since the last we discussed it, and I think that's a lapse in operations. Like, council should be apprised. What are we being committed to by our liaison, if anything at all? That's simply what it says. So, and it just so happens that we have Jim moving out of town, so that prompted the, let's see, get something rolling. So if there's any objection, I'm going to prepare a job description so that we can discuss it and move on. Okay. All right. The next one is discussion of updates to city ordinances and policy support staff. And this one is of particular interest, I think, to all of us counselors, because we have campaigned on making our city residential, keeping our city walkable, keeping our city with green space, et cetera, et cetera. Conceptually, really good items. The question is, how do you make them reality, and how do you apply them? And so one of the things that I have observed and I found to be super helpful is having Stan Laverman's policy expertise to walk us along housing issues or rental issues. And I see that there is a gap in our city organization for a broader depth or scope of policy issues. We don't have a support staff on other issues outside of, say, what Stan provides for us. And I'm thinking, who else could provide policy support so that council can discuss issues and have this individual help us research and put together policy, not procedures, but policies or ordinances, and of course have them reviewed by legal. But who can do that for us? And right now, I found a group. It's called the East. I think, Louise, you know who they are. The Eastern Iowa Council of Governments. It is
ECCOG. I was a representative from University Heights when, with MPO at different times when University Heights turn comes up.
So imagine, how do you pronounce ECCOG?
ECCOG is what they say.
Imagine ECCOG. They are the equivalent of MPOJC. When we have transportation issues, Kent Ralston and his team are transportation policy experts. They help us out. They benchmark for us, et cetera. Stan, okay. But ECCOG, that's what they do. They support 30-some other cities in doing research and policy proposals and submitting draft ordinances, draft programs for anything that the city is wanting to implement. And as we move forward to organize our city around the incoming hundreds of thousands of dollars from the hotel, it's going to be critical that we have policy support surrounding this council, so that we can make our best informed decision, have somebody to quickly do research for us, and assist us with our with our deliberations. So I wanted to ask if there's what your thoughts are on this issue, because it's a pretty big one.
Have you talked to Doug Elliott, the director?
No, I spoke to Chad Sands, who is a director on the.
I don't know him, but I know Doug Elliott's is like
So, for
the
example,
Kent Ralston.
Right now, zoning doesn't have anybody doing research for them. I know that our sensitive slopes ordinance, we almost didn't have a sensitive slope map until Larry Wilson was the one who proposed that we should engage this map service. Well, that map service has turned out to be super invaluable in defending our sensitive slopes, I think, going forward. But had we not had the knowledge base of that commission's member knowing that information, we would have just been saying, well, where do we get such a thing, and is it even possible? So and also what's important here too is that because ECOG is a nonprofit, they price their services different. They're about $90 an hour for all of the service and work product, and I think that that's money well spent supporting a number of different teams within the city organization, whether it be a counselor or whether it be a subcommittee or whether it be the zoning commission. At $90 an hour, we're really hard pressed to find a group that has such a broad.
Oh, Stan's dying to talk too. Is that?
Have you considered approaching the Urban and Regional Planning Department at the University of Iowa? They have field studies groups that are, they're sending them as far as Sioux City to do field studies. I think that it would be a good opportunity to engage graduate level students who are, months away from being out in the real world, who have, not real world experience, but practical experience with planning and zoning matters. We've used them in Iowa City. We have great interns in our office. And there's just a depth and of knowledge there in multiple areas in planning, from community development to zoning to housing to anything involving planning. So.
Right. I did consider that, and I think there was even Ames has another comparable group, and I went just about everywhere in Iowa figuring that's why I ended up in Cedar Rapids. But the point I was concerned about is consistency. Chad Sands is the director of this policy group of analysts, and he's been around for many, many, many years. So just like we appreciate Steve Ballard's historical knowledge base, you want to be able to work with an organization that keeps some form of your knowledge base for your local city. And what I thought was phenomenal was that this group supports right now a good, for the comprehensive plan. They've done at least 30 comprehensive plans all over eastern Iowa for mid to small town cities. The larger cities support their own comprehensive plan programs because of in-house staff, but these other mid to small towns, they resource with them. And they're pretty consistent, and they're stable in terms of a knowledge resource.
The MPO isn't working on a comprehensive plan for University Heights?
That was just an example of, what they do.
Okay, I'm just...
Right. But they are, you're right, Kent Ralston's group.
Because I was getting a lot of questions today, so I just... Okay.
I need to think about this a little bit, Sylvia, but I know that emergency management, we're in the middle of the process of selecting a group for a certain mitigation, but every city has to adopt mitigate, and I just can't think of the words right now, but it's a mitigation plan for every city in the county. And we had to look at 6 different companies, and one of them was ECOG, because they do that too. And
they
so
do a whole range of
yes, they do a whole range of different things.
Right.
We did not choose them, but they do a range of different things. And I was on the committee that looked closely at each of them, and did an investigation and references and things like that. And so I know there's many other options too, probably with this, but it's one.
I figured for $90,
It is one.
and they've done so many other cities.
Yeah, I just didn't know what you were going to talk about tonight, so I don't have that right here, but
So I'd like to pursue this conversation just because we are about to enter territory where we're going to start defining other issues about our residential village. We're going to start talking about what is it? What are we going to do with the funds coming from the hotel? What did we mean when we said stabilization, revitalization, road improvements? We've got this issue about the affordable housing lockbox on the budget. How are we going to handle that? Who else can give us a different breadth of opinion based on how many other clients, our cities, and opinions that they've helped out with? We have nuisance ordinances that need to be drafted. What else have other cities done? We have the green space ordinance that needs to be modified. Should it be modified to include a hotel computation in there? I mean, these are all examples of where a policy support system is really important, because if not, we're going to end up just borrowing next available, and next available may not be a suitable option for us, as was the case for that parkland dedication, in my opinion.
so you want council to...
I want council to discuss this, so I will give us an opportunity for a second round at the next
Okay.
at the next go. So I'll bring it up again.
Okay, thank you.
And that's it for me. I'll tabled everything else.
Okay, now we have the treasurer's report, and Lori submitted her report.
I motion.
There she is. I have to look at you like this.
Yep.
And,
So I motion for unanimous consent to adopt into the treasury report.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay. The warrants were sent to you. Was there any additions or corrections? There wasn't any more add-ons, were there? Okay. Hearing no additions or corrections, the warrants are adopted by unanimous consent.
And see, that's another item that can go in the consent agenda. Anyhow.
Yeah, I've never had anybody. Never mind. I'll just research that more. Police chief report. So, Nate, I know you circulated a written report. Were there any questions for Nate? I thought it had a lot of good information in it. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Did you have anything else to add?
Yeah, just going off what we talked about last night. If you want to, Chris Anderson has a copy of that in email, but that'll be the proposal, or the official proposal for the RMS system. The price on page 2 at $75.82 and $75.83 a year. They're splitting that between this budget year, being FY18, and then FY19. Those amounts will be, or could be, $1,000 less in each year. I'm still waiting for confirmation on the maintenance fee from the personnel at the JAC at the dispatch center about if that's covered under the countywide agreement or if that's on us. So, but the representative from TAC10 or Global Software and I went back and forth for about 2 weeks. We started. Their initial proposal was in the neighborhood of $34,000, and we've trimmed that down to $13,125 without losing any benefits to us. And at the chief's meeting today, we discussed this, and the county attorney was happy to hear that we were going to be using the same forms, or hopefully soon using the same forms as Iowa City and Johnson County, just as for when they get arrest reports, they all look the same. They're not
uniform.
It's easier for them to file things and such. So
we talked about last night the idea of making this over a number of payments over a period of time, and then that would be in the current budget, I think, to start making those payments. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, that's my understanding. With the $7,000 stop payment on the check from Crime Star, as Chris talked about last night, That $7,000 was there. If we're not paying it to Crime Star, it's still there. It's only so in this budget year, it's either going to be 500 less than that or 500 on either side of there. So that's within what we were looking at anyway.
And if there's consent to do this, I would just like to be, and Chris, I don't know if you have insights in terms of what you've heard, just 100% sure that we are out of the, there's no issue with the check that we had to stop payment on. And so I think that the feedback to them would be the council has decided to go with the company that the rest of the county is using, and we just want to confirm with you that we're returning the code. Not there's not going to be an issue. I don't know if you feel like you can get that sort of feedback, or if that's something we should ask Steve for assistance on.
I've already told them that Chris was not authorized to sign the contract. We had stopped payment on there. They just wanted to have a final call from me on issues that will be decided later.
So is that a final call that Steve should make, in the sense that it might lead them to say, well, that's your decision, we're going to pursue a claim against you, or something like that?
It was more of a courtesy call on my part. If we get to that type of conversation, then I will defer to Steve to handle the rest of the discussion.
Right. Why? Yeah, 'cause I'm not willing.
Steve,
Unless we want to know sooner.
Steve, are you aware of the situation? Do you know what we're talking? So, so Chris Lyons had sent a check for, a kind of a competitor of this program.
Okay.
And it's our position that we don't want to use that program. We want to use this program. And so Chris is just kind of making clear with them that that's not an issue.
Okay. And I owe Nate a call. That may have been what he was trying to get my attention on earlier in the week. So I think the way what you've said sounds good. Chris will call me if she needs me.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Thank you.
And I guess item 2 from last night was.
Well, I guess is council okay with that, with moving ahead with this program that is the same as the rest of the county? Do we want to have more discussion on that?
So all we're doing is coming under a master agreement from the county to get licenses for our group, right?
Correct. So the county has had this program for several years. They had it prior to 2012 when I initially started in University Heights.
Sure.
So it's been tested. Thankfully for us, the forms have already been gone through their paces. The changes have been made.
Will this system also allow you to track the types of complaints you're responding to? Or is it just arrest reports that
It would be specific to arrest reports. As far as tracking the types of complaints, the calls for service that we already have can track at least what the dispatch center or what we code the call as is tracked that way.
Okay.
They have a set number of
codes?
Of different call types they can use.
I have an idea on that.
And then, as you said last night, half of it would be a contract soon, and then the other half would be due upon installation with the new budget.
Correct. Yeah, half of it would be due
2019 budget.
when they start the project or the contract signing. Half of it is due at that point. The other half is due July 1 for FY19.
Well, do you want to make a motion?
Yeah, I would move that we give the interim chief authority to pursue that contract.
I'll second.
Okay, there's a motion by Nick and a second by Sylvia. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carries. Okay, very good.
You can go ahead.
Yeah, the next issue that we talked about last night, again, just to follow up on that, is the wages. There was a wage scale sent around. There was information about how long each officer has been here. My general take on this, and I've heard a little feedback that maybe we want to not get up to the pay scale. I mean, I'm wanting to hear feedback, but maybe not get up to the full pay scale in one jump. So I'm suggesting a potential middle ground of looking at if people have that the pay scale in front of them. At the bottom, it shows how long each officer has been here. We've got two officers, Kite and Sandifer, who have been here approximately the same time. Currently, one is making $1 less than the other. There's one's at 18, one's at 19. The idea I had, well, and also if you look at 13 and 18 months on the pay chart, that'd be 2075. My suggestion for a middle ground was to put them both at 20. And then in terms of Simcox, who's been here for 37 months, he would be up to the 2275. He's currently at the 2075. My thought is we take the incremental step to the 2175. But that's just, a thought. And if we're not wanting to go conform with the pay scale right away.
Here's a sheet you can look at.
But again, I've heard a little bit of feedback that maybe we want to not take the step all at once, but I'm just curious to what
From
you
a
guys
budget perspective, that's going to give us another gap. So we probably
The pay scale was designed when we sent out the budget, the pay scale was designed, or the budget was done with that pay scale in mind, that it would.
So you have the dollars within
yes,
that.
that would be within. Yeah.
Okay, so budget is
Yeah.
out.
So
Okay.
budget. There's no changes to the budget.
Right.
Thank you.
Yep.
That's
no
what I
problem.
Anybody want to do a
Understood,
change dive? Okay.
So you can look at the numbers there.
Right.
If you want.
Mm-hmm.
So, and one of the big things for me, I think, is just, making sure that this is fair. We also want to leave, the ability for interim chiefs in the future to have the ability to, reward hard work, proper, work, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we've kind of been a little past due in terms of keeping pace with even kind of minimal expectations from what I've heard.
I think these seem for me they seem like incremental changes, not something large that would be a shock to. I mean, it's in the budget, so I like that.
Yeah.
already.
Yep.
Are you fine with the incremental changes that Nick suggested? Do you want to
proposing
look at this sheet?
2175, 2020.
This-
Okay.
The
Yep,
first one is
2175,
what
2020.
was on the sheet, and this is what Nick is recommending now.
So, and just hearing a little feedback, this would give us the opportunity to, kind of let the dust settle a little bit and maybe revisit it later in the spring or something like that. So I would make a motion to
There you go.
the
I don't get
the
any
new
head nods.
hourly rate wages conform with the 20 for Kite, 20 for Sandifer, and 2175 for Simcox.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Nick, second by Sylvia. Discussion, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say nay. No? Okay, very good. Anything else?
Citations, I looked into that today, but that's nothing we need to.
I think we can table our last issue for right now.
Okay.
It's 10.
Thank you. We'll go on to streets and sidewalks, and Dottie wanted to discuss timely cleaning of sidewalks. Did you still want to discuss that?
Stan can help me address that also, because I don't think people fully understand what cleaning means in terms of width and depth. So maybe you could explain.
So I think you should clarify where the complaints are going. If they're going to you,
Go ahead.
that kind of adds an extra step. So I believe the police have been also out talking to people. It's something that I'm willing to do. It's pretty easy to do.
Some of them come to me, some come through next door.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'd like to have a path also, so that, and then if I need to refer it, I would either have to refer it to you or to the police so that they could cite them.
Sure.
But you would be able to determine the violation.
Well, can't you cite them? I mean,
who's
a
deputized
civil
the site?
citation?
I can do I can do a civil citation. Yeah. I think the first idea though is
Right.
you don't want to go to a civil citation. You want the property cleared if they're not
Yeah.
clearing it. So I think we need to reread that. I'll reread that again for University
I thought
Heights.
you were enforcing this for, even last term.
Yeah, but Dottie's been getting the complaints, and I haven't been getting any complaints. So that's what led to the question.
Oh, you know why? Because she got posted on Next Door Neighbor. I think.
Yeah, because I went to the city website and I went to report a snow complaint, and it went to Dottie's email address.
Yeah.
So at that point,
And I don't do next door at all, so, you know.
right. So there was some question: who do they go to? So I went to the city website.
Yeah.
And it went to Dottie. So that's where I directed them. So if that needs to change, that needs to change.
I'm worried because if we're going to start using, the non-clearing of of the for the rental program,
Right.
we don't have a process right now. So I guess
Right. It'll need to be documented a little bit better than it has been in the past. But the first idea is providing the courtesy notice, to the property that hasn't cleared. And I think there should be a procedure that we want to follow for the rest of the year, and then we need to revisit this for next year. If you want to blanket provide notice to properties that have had problems in the past, it is a courtesy notice, and after 24 hours you can have it cleared. So I think that's probably a discussion for another time again. And then, depending on who's doing it, it just needs to be documented. So.
Yeah, can we just put another one together for?
Well, I also need to know what that citation or that notice says because I haven't seen it either.
It says that you have 24 hours to clear the sidewalk after the last snowfall or any accumulation of ice, and it spells out full width down to concrete.
Yeah. Okay.
So not a single scoop. Not a snowblower over the top, but full width down to concrete.
Okay. And then
And you guys use those notices, right?
Yeah, I gave out a couple after this past weekend.
Right.
So,
Yep.
And then after 24 hours, they're cited if they haven't done it. Is that right?
After 24 hours, Steve, can you read through that section? We can have it cleared.
Yeah.
I think
After 24 hours after the notice.
Right.
City can
Correct.
hire.
Yeah, so then who directs
Mark
who to
Phelps.
clear it?
Is it Mark Phelps?
Yes.
Yes.
All the time, Mark Phelps, or do we have a short list of other folks that are readily available?
The issue is because it's not. We could hire anyone, I believe, because it's not a city bill. We're acting as the
Intermediary.
Intermediary. Yes. So
That thing.
Yeah, I think in the past the issue's been trying to find somebody to do it. And,
Right.
And I think with Mark and other snow contractors, the city's sort of kind of twisted their arm to say if we.
Yeah, we kind of made that in the deal.
Yeah. I'd like to have a process so we
It's in
know
the
who to
contract.
call.
Well, I'm worried about no process because if we're about to start enforcing rental ordinances and using that as a ground for
So
pulling
let's-
them in for.
How do we determine who to call? I mean, should we just send out some inquiries or what?
I would call Mark Phelps right now. I mean, if you had ones that needed to be cleared.
Will he do sidewalks?
Yes, he does it.
Okay.
He does some of the city sidewalks for us.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. So I know.
Otherwise, Turf Masters is, they're set up to deal with short-term snow removal.
Okay.
Also.
So well, I'll call Mark then.
Yeah.
Mark's very attentive, I find.
I would just
He
make
was very
if you're
quiet.
calling, just make sure there's some documentation of it. I guess is
Yeah. So somebody needs to give me that information after 24 hours.
Okay.
Dottie, you and I can work on procedures for that because those need to be in place. Especially if I'm a property owner and I have Mark Phelps showing up, I'd be all over. Why are you charging me $75 when I could have done it?
Oh no, Mark Phelps doesn't. Mark Phelps bills the city, and the city bills
Yeah.
the homeowner.
Okay, so
Yep.
how do we bill the homeowner then?
Because Mark Phelps gives us a bill.
No. But I mean, how do we do the billing? Do we attach it to the property tax value?
You can. I think it's as a courtesy. You send it to them
They
before
usually
that.
pay it that way.
Yeah.
We've not had to attach it.
No.
No.
yet.
Done it a few times.
I mean,
Right.
not very often. Rarely.
Yeah. Okay. So we
And
have
I
a
can
process.
Right, and I'll send over. I've just rewritten our policies in Iowa City, so I'll send those over.
Okay.
So you get an idea.
Okay.
Super.
I
Pictures,
just need to
pictures
know.
are good.
Yeah, that's what I say.
Yep.
Okay.
I just need to know
Yep.
what we're doing so
Right.
that Yeah. Okay.
And now that we're talking about pictures, Stan, where are we going to house all of this evidentiary information?
On Google.
Do we have other permitting systems? For example, last year when I connected 3 years ago, we were waiting for the Johnson County to come up with their permitting.
Sure. Yep. So they went with Government Outreach, who was bought by Acela. They implemented an Acela product. Shortly thereafter, the Government Outreach people who developed the program for Acela was spun off again. So they're off on their own again. We were waiting for them to develop their small city suite. They have not really expanded beyond what they have. So there's not a lot out there yet.
So are they also responsible for e-payments and also responsible for Fix-It, which would be, anytime anyone has a complaint, they could just take a picture and send
Right.
it off
I mean, that was, they had a code, enforcement application, and they also had, the complaint, the Tattletale app part of it, but they didn't have an e-pay system associated with it.
Okay.
If you're looking at that, I mean, you're looking at, enterprise software for finance and code enforcement of, 40, thousands, tens of thousands of dollars a year.
I don't think we need anything
right.
like that.
I think you got a lot of the data entered into the Google Drive and
Right, and we're looking at ePay actually in the website redesign.
Right.
So there can also be a section for a form where people could submit their
Sure.
complaints or concerns. So
right.
I don't think we need to have a software system for that. We can just make that part of the design.
Okay. That's good to know.
I think there was a question about Norm's records. I have access to all of Norm's records.
Who was the prior inspector that left? They were like in CDs or discs.
No. They're they're in WordPerfect, which is a little cumbersome to get from WordPerfect to anything that.
A couple of series ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
All right.
when I look at them, I convert them to PDF.
I'm just worried we're moving into a new world order, and if we don't have evidence to back us up,
sure.
Risk. I know it.
Right.
And we all know it.
Yep.
We know what happens when we're not prepared for it. So.
Thank you, Stan.
Thank you very much. I think that takes care of that.
Okay. Thanks, Dottie. Discussion of olive court tree evaluation. Virginia, we're going to have, I know that you have some of that in your report too, your engineer report about it. Did you want to speak about it first, or did you want to introduce Virginia?
We're moving into the olive court design.
This is nicer
One of the
than
components which everybody's concerned about is the existing trees on Olive Court. So I'm passing out an exhibit that shows you basically existing conditions, highlighted where the street's located.
I have a picture.
And it shows each of the existing right-of-way trees that are out there, and sort of a legend which corresponds with an assessment that Virginia did last summer in her capacity as chairman of the tree board, chairperson of the tree board. So we just wanted to get that in front of you tonight and let Virginia sort of go through that quickly to get that on your radar and what we're looking at.
So in the evaluations we did last summer, we've got a couple of different categories here of trees. The first that I'll go through is the purple ones, the ash trees. So we've got 3 ash trees left on this block. As you guys are pretty well aware at this point, the emerald ash borer is killing ash trees. It's very close to us now. It's all over the university property by the field house. So we really don't expect these 3 to live much more than 2-3 years at this point, at the maximum. Have we confirmed with any homeowners that they're not treating those trees, Josiah? I mean, I haven't heard from them that they are.
Not at this
and
time.
for the most part, any ash trees on public right-of-ways that are being treated that information has been conveyed to the tree board at this point. So these are done with. So, I mean, part of the reason we've been putting off this construction project for so long is we don't want to kill all these trees when we do this big construction project. If you are going to be doing major construction near a tree, you generally want to stay completely outside of the drip line of the tree. Now, most of these trees go clear over the street, so that's right off the bat out of the question. So other categories that we have here are we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 that are in the orange, and these are recommended removal as a part of the construction process because I think it's highly unlikely that they'll survive the construction. They're already very, very large diameter trees. If you are not able to preserve the drip line of the tree canopy, generally you then move to a somewhat smaller zone of protection to try to at least save that, and that is generally regarded to be 5 times the diameter of the tree. And even in this case, we are going to be cutting way into that 5 times the diameter of the tree, and so there's just really no way to preserve the root system on these trees and do the construction. I think you could handle some of these the way they were handled on the Sunset project, where homeowner has an option of leaving the tree through construction to see if maybe it survives, but then if it has to be removed later, it's on their cost and not as a part of the city project. But again, for these 4 that are orange, I think the chances of those trees surviving construction are basically nil. And just as an aside on the topic of tree protection in general too, when you're looking at a project like this, the trees that you want to save are not necessarily the biggest, oldest ones. Trees do have a finite lifespan in an urban environment. If these were in a park setting and you could move the infrastructure to go around them somehow, then you would want to look at preserving the biggest, oldest trees. But in this case, the ones that are the best candidates for preservation are sort of the smaller, middle-aged ones that still have, they're not as close to the end of their useful lifespan. They still have potentially more room to grow and keep going. So we've got, under the yellow category, we've got 3 trees that have serious structural defects in them. Now, these 3 trees, I would have recommended their removal last year in the summer when we did that DNR project, had we been looking at Olive Court. But again, because we know these are probably going to come down, we didn't want to have the homeowners pay that cost when we would potentially have the city pick that up and pay for it as a part of this city project. So those 3, again, I don't recommend keeping them. The 3E, I know after we did this assessment in August 2017, that homeowner did install a cable in that tree, so it's possible that that one could be moved into the save category if the homeowner's interested. And then the last 5 are the green ones, trees that are in good condition. You could offer the homeowner the option of retaining these trees through the construction. That does not guarantee their survival by any means. It just is that these are the best candidates for retaining out of the bunch. Any questions on that?
I like the fact that the residents will have a say. That's critical.
And
yeah,
it will be lighter, at least, if we control some of the trees.
Lighter?
More visibility, yeah, because it's very dark. Ooh, it's very dark many times because of the canopy of some of these trees.
I kind of also want to point out all this empty space too in front of, on the east side of the street. Houses 16 through 32 have nothing. There's a ton of empty spots on the west side of the street too. We haven't done any planting on this street for the past 4 years because we knew there was going to be this big construction project coming up and we didn't want to have trees that have to be worked around for that construction project. And so though it really is a shame to lose all these, we are going to be filling in these vast quantities of blank spots too. And so I think overall the street will probably look much, much better 3-4 years out from construction than it does even today.
Josiah, thanks for blowing it up this big. That's so much easier to see.
So the other comment in my report is I just wanted to ask officially, but I would like to work with Virginia to come up with suggestions for tree replacements and street trees on this street like she's been doing. So does anybody have any issue with that?
No, just,
Sounds good, no issue.
Just keep in mind that it looks like solar energy will be added to the number 24. So any trees around that area hopefully should not be so tall that they would make the solar panels useless.
Okay, so I submitted a written report to move into mine. The only thing I wanted to point out on that, unless there's questions, I attached a follow-up about the streetlights on Melrose and Kosher. Two items. One, the city of Iowa City did go ahead and switch out the light over the traffic signal to an LED fixture. Then the other outstanding question from that discussion was, could we add another light to the other traffic signal on the other corner? So we did meet with Mid-American out there, and they measured the wires. So we can add a very short light on that one, short enough that would be just right above the traffic signal, so it really wouldn't function very well because you need that height to throw that spread of light out, so you don't end up with these little hot spots. So my recommendation, that's the map there. The other thing we talked to them about, so that green arrow on the bottom, that's pointing to the existing traffic signal there at the intersection. That's the one where all the overhead wires go right over the top of it, and which causes the conflict for putting another light there. So they did indicate to us that the yellow circles, those are the wood utility poles that Mid-American has. So the two to the east of the intersection and the two to the west by Triangle Park, they said all four of those are candidates that they could add a light like they have on other poles around town. So given the wires over the traffic signal, if you do want to proceed with adding light to that intersection from our earlier conversation with Paul Moore, I would suggest you make a request to Mid-American to add lights there and then evaluate it. The other thing I note is that with the streetscape project in the next 4 years or so, those wires are scheduled to go underground, so that would be the time to look at the signal and do it right.
I'm comfortable holding off to 2020 when we have that whole package of work, because I'd hate to put out work now, pay for it, and then have it go away or be modified.
Paul had a point, though, also, that, it is quite dark. I mean, maybe one light wouldn't be, so big a deal, but it would help, because that's pretty dark down there.
It's very dark walking home from a football game.
Right.
And when they brought in that lighting at Triangle Park, that helped tremendously because you really can't see the curbs very well and walking down. I mean, I do it all the time, so I know.
Kosher 100, it's dark, pitch dark.
In fact, a number of people from Grandview have expressed to me how dangerous it is to walk back and forth to the hospital, and how they're feeling very lucky that they haven't been attacked or haven't had an injury.
So if I recall correctly, the method for the city to ask Mid-American to put a light on one of their wooden poles is, I think it's a form that gets filled out. They do not, if I recall correctly, they don't charge the city to install the light. They just add it to the list of their their monthly, so many lights per month, and you pay a monthly fee. So if that's something you want to do, I could find the last time we did it. Come up with that.
Yeah, I would ask if you all.
So you're going to motion for that?
Yeah.
Well, I want to ask about cost as well. I think we need to find out, are we doing one light or are we doing all six?
Well, I think you have two, right?
Yeah,
So-
just two.
So there's two poles nearest the intersection. They looked at the two on the east and the two on the west.
Right, so that's
they
four.
said all four were candidates.
Right.
So
All
my
four.
suggestion is probably just the nearest two,
Mm-hmm.
and then see how that.
Right.
Okay.
So do I have a second?
Yep,
Second.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Dottie, second by Sylvia. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion
And
carries.
I'll work with Josiah on that.
Thank you, Dottie. Then I'm sure you have a few more things.
I wasn't gonna. No.
No?
Everything else is in the written report.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any questions? I gave a written report for sanitation in my mayor's report. So, Lisa, do you have e-government?
I have nothing.
Okay. And old business, new business, anything from city council? Okay, as any announcements? Okay, so will some council member read recommendation, motion to recommend? Would somebody read that?
I'll volunteer, Nick.
You have the text for it? Or I'm
I-
reading what's on here.
Yeah, I'm just reading what's on here.
Recommendation of city attorney to meet in closed session pursuant to Iowa Code Section 25.1. So to evaluate the professional competency of an individual whose performance is being considered to prevent needless and irreparable injury to that individual's reputation, and that individual requests a closed session.
Okay, motion by Nick. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Lisa. Okay, roll call vote.
Aye.
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 Okay, we'll convene to closed session in the police department.
Louise?
We're all back, so we're reconvening to open session, and we need to look at calendars for which dates are you thinking, Sylvia?
Very soon, because we're up against a timeline.
Well, like February 20th?
Yeah, if we can do sooner, February 16th would be nice. We have good information to work from.
Well, February 15th, I know
Yeah, but they're from 5 p.m. to, say,
to
7.
whatever,
So if we showed up
6:30.
at 7,
I can't be here on Thursday.
that's fine. Okay. If we had any legal questions, we'd quickly email you or text you. Poor Steve.
I won't be able to respond.
No, he's
Either
at a
way.
concert that night.
right.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
His daughter's concert.
That's right. So sorry. Okay. But in the interest of time, we
You wanna
are
meet
up
on-
against a deadline.
So
S-
have we decided on Thursday?
We can do Friday if anybody is willing to just be around for half an hour. We need to start the discussion.
On what are we discussing?
I can't say, it's confidential.
So you want to meet in closed session? Is that
Yes.
what you're thinking?
That's right.
Oh, okay. I prefer the
Make a
next week.
decision?
No, we're listening to more information so we can eventually make a decision. And after then, it'll go rather quickly because the decision
Oh.
will have to become public.
Do we have to listen to this information, or could it be sent to us?
We still have to make a decision even after you get it sent to you.
Is there a way we could get the information and then,
Yeah, I can send it out tonight, but we still need to meet on it.
can we set a meeting through email, or do you have to do it?
Let's set it now so that we don't have to worry about, who can make it.
You said it.
Yeah, we can set it.
Okay, so if we want, let's look at the week of the 19th of February.
Yeah, I like that week better. That's what I started with, but
We can even do a 5 p.m. if people want to get this done and over with. Or we can do an
So what day are you talking about?
Monday, February 19th.
I think I'd prefer 7, but I could do 5 if everybody want. I'm flexible.
I'd rather do 5.
You can call in if you're driving in from
Get it
somewhere.
over with.
How about 6? How about
Whatever works for people, I will.
I just
try
want to get it
accommodate.
over.
It's a good getting over with.
what works for you, Lisa? Okay, she doesn't care, so Nick, are you okay with 5?
I think that day actually I'm okay with 5.
Okay, 5 on the 19th.
This is a short meeting, correct?
It has to be.
Well,
Yes.
Yeah,
why don't they all have to be?
right.
Okay, and Steve, you can come on that date. Okay, very good. The 19th at 5 p.m. here.
Right. And then I also, we will probably need to follow up with another meeting to listen to other individuals, inform you on additional information about this preliminary steps, because we're going to be taking quite a bit of steps. So maybe, or maybe I can just do everything on the 19th. I'll send everything out to you guys tonight and get individuals lined up on the 19th. Let's see if they can't make it. Okay?
So how brief will that be then?
I don't know. Maybe an hour.
Maybe an hour now because she has individuals.
They won't be talking too long, though.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So the 19th should be from 5 to 6, possibly.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Is there any objection to adjournment?
Nope.
Hearing none, the meeting's adjourned by unanimous consent. Thank you.